Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show. Today is our Security Plus study group on a Friday. This never happens. That's the way the schedule goes this month. So we snuck in our last study group of the month, and we made it on a Friday. So we'll see how this goes. Maybe you'll like it better on Friday. I don't think so, but we'll try it. We're going to see what happens. Hey, chat room. Hi, everybody. Hope you're having a very good Friday, getting ready for the weekend. We're going to do all Security Plus Q&A. This is the pre-show, so you're about 10 minutes early. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward a bit to the part where we're actually doing something constructive. Let me check my cameras. They look good. Everything is turning out to be working just fine there. Hey, how can I get that to work? I'm finding new things to do with my my video switcher. What was the thing that just went through there? Oh, that's nice. I found a new feature. I can double tap on a link. That's handy. All right. Is there a schedule when these occur? There is. You go to professormesser.com/calendar and you'll see when all the next events will be. So there is absolutely a schedule. Most of the time I'm able to keep that schedule. This month I changed it up just a little bit, but all the changes are always on the calendar. I always keep that updated so you'll know. Hello, DC. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Malaysia is here. England's checking in. Jordan. Finally, in the U.S., Hollywood, California. I guess DC was first on the list, weren't they? New York City. Welcome. Upstate New York's here as well. Colorado. Lima, Peru. Copperas Cove. We also got Texas here, West Virginia, Waterloo, Carrollton, Georgia, welcome. Arizona, there's Florida, Dublin, Ireland, North Carolina. They're going by so fast now. Ukraine, England, Maryland. Hello, Jamaica. North of the UK, welcome. I went to north of the UK here in this over the summer. Near the end of last year. It was very nice. Spent some time in Scotland. It was great. What a great trip. There's Frisco, Texas, and Tennessee, and Ohio. Welcome, Cincinnati. There's South Carolina, the Bronx, Indiana, Stafford, Virginia, Minnesota, Mississippi, Nashville, Texas, Indiana, St. Vincent, Tampa, Florida, Kansas City, Indiana, Orange County, California, New Jersey, York, welcome. Palestine, Virginia, Virgin Islands, West Virginia. Back to back. Hey, Pembroke Pines. How are things on Pines Boulevard? How are things just north of Miramar? Orange County, Largo is here. Welcome. I believe it is the Bristol, UK, and not Bristol, Florida. Although it could be Bristol, Florida. Hello, Greece. Welcome. More Hollywood. Torrance, California, welcome. Morocco, Dublin. Fort Bragg, welcome. Somalia is here. It is. It's hard to keep up now. So many people in the chat. It just streams by. Let me make sure I've got everything ready to go because we do have actual work to do today. It's not work. It's fun. I ask the questions in this first hour and you answer them. That's how difficult it is. It's always fun. There's no worries. There's no pressure. There's no problems getting. In fact, you want to get a question wrong now. Now's the time when you completely mess it up, and then you know what to look out for in the exam. So I've got recordings going here. This is my streaming device up here. It's actually a remote terminal view, a remote video view into my OBS. So that is doing the streaming to YouTube that you are seeing. You cannot rewind this live video because I've disabled that capability. A number of people would come into the live stream as we were doing it live, and they would not realize they were not live, that they were behind. So I've specifically disabled that DVR feature, unfortunately. But it's too bad because people like to be here live and answer the questions live, and that was the reason I disabled it. If it was just me talking, I'd probably leave it. But there is a need, there is a urgency to have everybody here at exactly the same time so that we can do the Q&A and you can participate live. That's half the fun, I think. So this whole streaming setup is pretty awesome. It has taken years and years to sort of piece together all of the things that I really, really wanted in here. And it's exactly where I want it right now, which is very unusual for me to have a technical configuration set up that I'm completely happy with. But about this time last year, we upgraded the studio to 4K. I got a new camera. So the new camera it's this one. Hi. I love this new camera. That looks good. I got a new video switcher because it had to switch to 4K. So I got my Blackmagic video switcher in front of me. That's the pretty lights that you see on that unit straight ahead. The audio system I've had for, I don't know, 10 years now, maybe almost. A little bit less than that, I guess. It's my CompTIA Radius console is what I use here on the top. It's actually embedded Linux that's running there. We got about 4 minutes until we get started. Get things going there. So it's kind of fun to have all the little pieces and parts. This is one system. These two screens in front of me. It's my Mac, my iMac Pro is what I'm running on those two devices. I have my iPad in front of us to be able to see the video, see the slides, which I guess would be good to have ready, except I need to have that clock up so I can see what's going on. I don't have a clock on my screen. I've got a separate MacBook here so that I can have the actual slides. So the video of the slides you see coming from this device, the video of the talking head comes from the camera in front of me, and occasionally I'll switch over to this device, the one in front of me. This one here you don't get to see. This is just the chat and the other things there. So that's how that works. Yeah, it's odd that the CompTIA audio mixer is called Radius, the Radius console, which does not run Radius, as it turns out. It has its own authentication inside of itself that works. So that's, yes, it is quite a mix. The video up here that you see streaming to you is on a Windows machine, Mac OS in front of me, and obviously if you're on my website right now, you are on Linux. So you're doing quite a bit of things. The cabling situation in the back, actually pretty good. It's not perfect. I will not say that I'm a cabling expert, but I spent a lot of extra time during the process of putting this together. You can't see it very well, but to the left and right of this desk are 19-inch racks that are soundproofed. So I have quite a bit of equipment. I try to fit everything into the desk. It's all one self-contained unit. It's an enormous desk. I'm stretching my arms and I'm still not hitting the two sides of the desk. It is so big and it's very deep so that I can fit all this stuff in one place. There is other equipment like the streaming device you see here is actually a screen that is sent over, and I've got a separate, I call it my data center. It's closet. It's a walk-in closet, but it's my data center that has a 19-inch rack in it, a full-size one. And I've got some rack-mountable devices in there, but that's where the rack-mounted streaming server is, to have that there. So it's very useful. It's a really nice setup. I feel like I've learned a lot through the years. This started literally with video to tape, to 8mm videotape, and the lights that you would put in a garage, like the 1,000-watt halon lights. So that did not work great. It was beautiful, worked fantastic, but boy, not the way you want to do a video setup over any extended period of time. Now, you don't see it, but there are two lights up here. There's two lights behind me. It looks like I'm in a completely dark room, and I guess except for the desk, I am. Right behind me, the black that you see there is pretty much the black that I see, even though behind me, perfectly lit, because I've got lights right here that are directed right behind me to the set. So that's why it's set up that way, to have those things there. So we're about ready to get started. Another 30 seconds or so. It's all Security Plus. Hey, Marcel, you got my practice questions well made, organized. Thank you so much. I spent a ton of time on that book because I wanted to be the ultimate set of practice questions, and I wanted to be different than practice questions you got at any other time. We'll talk about that in a second. I'll tell you all about the book as we get into this, but it's something that has worked so well with Security Plus that I'm going to do other practice exam books for the other certifications as well, because it's just something I have not seen before, and I wanted a set of practice books that were something I could use. Let's do a study group, everybody. I have plenty of questions, so let's get slides up. There's a green light. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2020 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group, coming to you live from Messer Studios. Thanks for joining us. My name is James Messer. I'll be your host for this first hour of all brand new Security Plus Q&A. Every month on the study group is a whole brand new set of questions. I'll be asking you questions in this first hour, and you will be answering them online. I'll tell you in a moment how you make all of those things happen. I've also got in the second hour, I will be opening up the phone lines. I'll be taking messages from the chat room. I'm noticing now as I'm looking at my screen, in fact, that you're seeing part of this. Let's move this out of the way. There we go. See? It's all live. That proves it. Thanks for being here. The second hour, I'm going to have you call in and put questions in the chat room. So we got plenty of things to go through today. The way that you can participate is you can join us by going to I'll pop open a brand new browser screen, a new tab in your browser, and go to professormesser.com/QA. At professormesser.com/QA will take you to a question that is waiting for you. It's actually a service we use called Socrative. It's a fantastic service, so I can ask these questions, and then you, in real time, can answer these questions live on the internet, like magic. There's also an app you can get for your favorite mobile device. You can find it by typing in the Socrative Student app. That is the name of the device app. Socrative Student app is what that is. There's also a Socrative app for the teacher. That's the one for me. You don't want that one. You want the Socrative Student app, and it will ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, ProfessorMesser. So make sure you type that in right. If you do all of those things properly, you will see a question waiting for you that asks, which of the following would be the best use of SHA-2? Which of the following would be the best use of SHA-2? Would it be to confidentially transfer email messages over public networks? Would it be used to securely store passwords in a centralized database? Would it be to transfer private keys over a public network? Would it be to hide data inside of a graphics file? Or would it be to use the same key when encrypting and decrypting? If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA, and we can talk all about that. We'll come back to those answers in just a moment. Let me tell you that what we'll talk about today is all about Security Plus. We're going to talk about the Security Plus exam, which is the latest version. This latest version of the exam is SY0501. That's the current list of the version of the questions that you'll get. It was released on October the 4th, 2017. So we're expecting that the retirement date, if they stay close to what they are, usually they retire the exam about 3.5 years after the exam is released. And if we do the math, the expected retirement date is March of 2021. So if you're currently working on this existing SY0501, keep working on it. You have plenty of time to get through this. And of course, those dates are subject to change. You never know what the differences might be. They might make it later. They might make it sooner. Always keep and checking into the CompTIA website. They'll tell you what's going on. To earn your Security Plus, it's a single exam. You can get a maximum of 90 questions over a 90-minute time frame. The passing score is 750. So that's the score that you will need to have from a scale of 100 to 900. It's an odd scale. It's an odd scoring system. They don't tell you much about it, but that's what you have to get to pass that exam. The exam is both multiple choice questions, which is very similar to what we just saw, and performance-based questions, which are anything but multiple choice. We'll look at some of those in just a moment. Don't forget that we have Security Plus question every week on my Twitter account, professormesser.com/Twitter. It's another place to go. We've also got professormesser.com/YouTube. Feel free to go there and subscribe to all of the videos that we are doing with those. We've also got professormesser.com/Instagram. If you want a Security Plus question, I put them on Instagram as well. We use the technique on Instagram where you can slide to the left. They call it a carousel. And I ask the question, and then you can slide it to the left and see if you got the answer right, which is kind of fun. Have those there as well. Thank you for being here on this live stream. Thank you for your ongoing support of the Security Plus and what we are doing. Some of you may or may not know, every single one of my Security Plus videos and all of my training videos are available for you to watch for free online with no restrictions. There's no registration. I don't hide things behind a paywall. There's nothing I'm holding back. You get every minute of every video. One thing that I also make available is I take all of the content from every single video. And with Security Plus, it's over 100 videos, almost 200 when you start looking at it, that cover everything from network design and cloud computing and cryptography and risk management and everything else you might find. And we have them available for you to download at professormesser.com/securitycn. That set of course notes goes also towards helping keep the website up and running. Why don't I show you what one of those looks like? I've got my Security Plus course notes on my screen just so you can get a feel for what these look like. Let's start that up and give you a view of it. Here they are. So here are the course notes. They are for Security Plus, 94, 93, 94 pages. Let's look at the list that says stream and block ciphers. I'm going to click on that. So you can see everything from those videos for stream and block ciphers is documented in this set of course notes. It's a one-stop shop. Now, obviously, you might want to take your own notes. Please do that. But you may get to a point where you'd like to save some time. You'd like to have everything in one place. You'd like it in a PDF file. You'd like it all in one concise view. These are the course notes for you. There's also a physical version of the course notes. So if you're someone who likes a book version, it's exactly the same content, just in a physical form. And you can see it's the same slides, the same information, just in a full color, high quality, perfect bound paperback book. This is something that also goes, as I mentioned, to keeping the website going. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/securitycn. And thank you for your ongoing support with that. It really does make a big difference. We have also another opportunity. If you're someone who likes to support the site, but you don't really have any money to purchase any course notes, one thing that you can do is spend zero money and support the site financially by buying from Amazon by going to professormesser.com/Amazon. So it's another place to go to help us without having to spend any extra money. You pay exactly the same price you always pay at Amazon, but they give us a bit of a commission at the end of the month for you doing that. And that actually does help quite a bit as well. Consider doing that the next time you buy at Amazon by going to professormesser.com/Amazon. We've also got this podcast or this video class Q&A study group available in video form on my website, but you also have a podcast version of this by going to professormesser.com/podcast. The video version on YouTube is one that also has timestamps on it. This takes about a day or so after the live stream is available. And my marketing manager, Lori, hi, Lori, say hi, everybody. She is watching this either live or usually on the replay. And she sees the live chat go by. She sees all of the timestamps. She's the one that puts all of that in there. You can find everything you want very quickly. You just click on the timestamp and the video jumps ahead or jumps back. Let's look at that question that we looked at before, which was what we call our rewind question. It was a question from last month that asked, which of the following would be the best use of SHA-2? Would it be to confidentially transfer email messages over public networks? Would it be to securely store passwords in a centralized database? Would it be to transfer private keys over a public network? Would it be to hide data inside of a graphics file? Or would it use the same key when encrypting and decrypting? And if we look at how we did, we can see that we're a little torn on this one. 43% of us, 44% is the winner. Everybody chose, those 44% chose B, securely store passwords in a centralized database. 25% of you said transfer private keys over a public network. 13% said use the same key when encrypting and decrypting, and effectively a tie at 12% said confidentially transferring email messages over public networks, and only 6% said hide data inside of a graphics file. Well, SHA-2 is a hashing algorithm. It's one that is used to be able to take an amount of data and be able to create what we call a message digest from it. SHA-1 and SHA-2 are very popular. SHA-1 at this point has been kind of phased out. SHA-2 is probably one of the more popular variants of SHA that we are using these days. And a hash algorithm is primarily used to make something represent a short string of text. It's perfect if you want to store passwords and have them stored in a confidential way. So this is exactly where we would go to be able to use these hashes. Storing passwords is a great way to be able to store data. So those 44% of you that said answer B, securely store passwords in a centralized database, that is exactly what you would want to do. Now, some folks in the chat were mentioning that SHA-1 is still in use in some places, but there have been collision attacks that have been created. Collision attacks is when someone can take two different kinds of data, use the SHA-1 algorithm on those two different kinds of data, and end up getting the same exact hash, which should never happen. We have that happen all the time. So make sure that if you are especially things like certificates, you would always want to use SHA-2. There's still places for SHA-1 to be used, though. SHA-1 pretty useful to have if you just want to do a quick check, because it doesn't use a lot of CPU cycles. It's very easy. It's a quick 160-bit digest. If you just need a simple verification that doesn't have a huge need for the for protection, well, then SHA-1 may be the right answer. SHA-2, though, I guess our CPUs are really at the point where SHA-2 works pretty well for that. So, by the way, if you did answer that B, securely store passwords in a centralized database, that was the right answer. Let's now skip ahead to all new questions for this study group. Our first new question of the study group is always a performance-based question. On your exam, you will certainly get multiple choice questions like this one, where you get a question and then you get some answers to choose from. In a question like this, you have like a 20% chance of getting the right answer, even if you didn't know. You could take a guess, and you probably should do that. But the problem is that the beginning of the exam, you don't get multiple choice questions. Be ready for this, by the way. Some people don't know this is coming, and they're hit with it right away, and it can really take you out of your test-taking mode. The first handful of questions you get will not be multiple choice questions. They will be fill-in-the-blank questions. They'll be matching questions. They'll be drag and drop. There'll be things that you may have to fill in. So what I've created for you is a performance-based question, something that hopefully would be very similar to what you are doing on your exam. So here is our performance-based question of the month. It is kind of a visual question. So this is in two parts on the screen. If you're on Socrative, you'll be able to pop open the graphic to be able to see this. The question asks, create two firewall rules that would allow SNMP queries from the management server to the web server and block all other traffic from the management server. Those are your two rules. The two rules are allow SNMP queries from the management server to the web server and block all other traffic from the management server. And the other piece that you need to complete this question is the map of the network. Let me move my head out of the way instead of giving you this map of the network. There we go. So here's the map of the network. You can see on the left side is the web server, the video server, a file server. There's a DMZ switch in the middle with a firewall. And then on the other side of the network, that is on the internal network, is the database server, the management server, and the storage server. Now, those of you listening in on the podcast, I'll give you some IP addresses to be able to do this, but this may be a good way for you to work through all of these. Remember to put your answer in. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please don't put any answers into the chat room. So the question says we need two firewall rules that would allow SNMP queries from the management server to the web server. The management server is over here in the internal network at 10.2.1.47. The web server is 10.1.1.2. So there's the only hint I'm going to give you for these two firewall rules to have these things here. Firewall rules is probably one of the most fundamental things that you will do as an IT security professional. And I'm not saying that because I worked as a systems engineer for a firewall company for 7 years. So that's one where I have installed literally hundreds and hundreds of firewalls onto people's networks and configured them and migrated them and troubleshot and anything you can think with a firewall I was doing. So this is right in my wheelhouse. I love firewall questions to be able to do this. You need to be familiar with firewall questions too. So this is one where I'm giving you kind of the basics. These days, we don't do a lot with, well, we do still do a lot with port numbers and firewalls. These days, firewalls actually work more at the application level. So you can specify what application. You would say block SNMP in your firewall rather than saying block a particular port number. But we're starting at the fundamentals here. I want to see if you know what those port numbers might be, and we'll go from there. So you folks are locking in your answers. I see a few coming in on the other side. Well, let's break this down and kind of get a feel for this picture and see if we really do understand what it's asking of us, because there's a lot here to look at and a lot that we need to figure out. So let's break down these firewall rules. And this is where you would absolutely get a feel for where you would go with these things. So you'll notice this single firewall actually has 3 interfaces in it. It has an interface going to the DMZ, it has an interface going to the internal network, has an interface going to the internet. And that's pretty common with firewalls. These days, firewalls might have up to 24 or even more interfaces on them. So it's not uncommon to have firewalls with so many different interfaces on them. That may be something that you want to look at when you're looking at your firewalls. We've also got in the DMZ these 3 devices: a web server, a video server, and a file server. And there's a switch connecting those, and the switch is what's connecting also to the firewall. On the other side, on the internal networks, that database server, management server, and storage server. Now you notice the firewall rules are set up in this format. The rules are numbered, and then there's a source IP, destination IP, protocol, which would be in this case TCP or UDP, a port number, and then the disposition, what you would like to do with that traffic. Would you like to allow that traffic, or would you like to block that traffic? Firewall rules start at the top and evaluate the rules in order from top to bottom. So our first rule needs to be one that is relatively straightforward. Our first rule asked that we want to create 2 firewall rules that would allow SNMP queries from the management server. So we've got a management server at 10.2.1.47. We want to have SNMP queries from the management server to the web server, which is 10.1.1.2. So our source IP is going to be 10.2.1.47. Let's put them all out. There it is. Our destination IP is the web server, which is 10.1.1.2. There's our destination IP. Now we have to know SNMP. Does anybody remember what SNMP runs on? Is it TCP or UDP based? SNMP is UDP based, so we would put UDP into that particular tuple of the firewall. It's what we call those different options within the firewall. The port number for SNMP, 161. There you go. Some folks in the chat room remembering it. And we want to allow that traffic. So the final part, the final tuple there on the disposition is allow. Did I get the source IP wrong? I did. I got to put 1. See, we're going to do this on the fly. This is what happens when I do this late at night. See, it's 2. See how easy that was? So everybody rewind back to where we talked about that. Our source IP is indeed the management server at 10.2.1.47. Thank you, chat room. It's always good to have the chat room there. They're my backup. Thanks for having my back. And we're going to allow that traffic. Now, in most cases on all firewall rules, if you don't put anything else, all other traffic is blocked. That's sort of the common configuration on most of these firewall rules, is that everything else is blocked. But we specifically wanted a separate rule that said block all other traffic from the management server. And that may be because the only way to log that traffic is to have an actual rule. Generally, if you don't have a rule in the firewall, it won't log it. So there's a practical reason. So we want to block all other traffic from the management server. So again, there's my problem again. See, you guys caught me twice with the wrong IP addresses. So our source IP, again, same source IP, the management server. That management server is 10.2.1.47. The destination IP, though, is everything else. So it would be any. That's a very common tuple to have in a firewall, just everything. And there might also be in your firewall a default for this. It might be 0.0.0.0/0. That's another example of putting a catch-all in for a firewall configuration. The protocol is any. We've got, because we're going to do every protocol, and the port number obviously would be any as well. This, of course, is not going to be an allow rule. It's going to be a block rule to have this here. Different firewalls use different terminology for these. Different firewalls sometimes use different settings for their tuples. Different firewalls have different tuples that you can choose from. This is a very basic version of a firewall configuration, but that is exactly what you would have to have those two rules in your firewall and have all of the traffic going from the management server to that database server or to the web server. In the chat room, a couple of questions on this one. One was, we used UDP 161 for that management server to perform SNMP queries. Queries run over UDP 161. And as people were saying in the chat room, what about SNMP traps? What other people were saying in the chat room was, what in the world is a trap? That's not, well, a trap is something that is sent to the management server without the management server ever asking for it. Effectively, think of it as an alarm. So we would tell the web server, hey, web server, if you ever get to 80% of utilization, send an SNMP trap or alert back to the management server, even though the management server never asked you for it. That's something obviously would have to be pre-programmed, pre-designed, pre-configured in that web server, in the router, in the switch, and whatever device this is to be able to send the trap. This particular rule, this particular question, asks nothing about traps. In fact, traps is not something that is always configured on people's networks because it does take extra time to configure those traps. So a trap would obviously use UDP 162, but in this case, we didn't ask for any traps. That's why we did not put any other port number other than UDP 161 in that list. So we would not add that into this. And in fact, unless your network specifically has traps configured, you would not add that into your firewall. You would not like it to be there. A trap is not a honeypot. It's not an actual trap. It's not like a bear trap. It is really waiting for something to happen, like a high utilization, a large number of errors, a high amount of traffic over a particular interface. An interface suddenly is disabled. An interface, somebody unplugs and it loses signal. That is what we would then define as a trap until, if that happens, send a trap message to our management server, which effectively is send an interface message to our management server saying, we got an error, we got a message, we got a thing you need to know about. That's what a trap is. Has nothing to do with trapping anything other than, I guess, we trapped an alarm. Kind of an odd name, isn't it? SNMP is kind of an odd thing anyway, and these terms that we use to be able to do that. Why is it UDP? Well, why not? UDP obviously very easy on a management scale to be able to send traffic back and forth. So UDP is a good one to use for something like this. You don't want to put more traffic on the network than necessary. And since SNMP is something that's usually done on the inside of someone's network, you're usually not going across a wide area network or a network that would be unstable. You would not use TCP for SNMP type traffic. UDP and TCP traffic generally go across the network. There's no problem at all getting that data there. So that would be useful to have those there. As people mentioned, why would we need that second rule if there's an implicit deny in all the firewalls? Because sometimes you want to log this information. An implicit deny, if we didn't put that last line in, would still work exactly the same way. It would still block all of that traffic, but it wouldn't log anything. So very commonly, people will put into their firewall an explicit deny, because that explicit deny would then be logged in the firewall log, which is kind of nice to have those things there. Now, wouldn't that second rule cancel out the first rule? Another good question for a firewall. We could do a whole study group on firewalls, couldn't we? The firewall rules are evaluated from top to bottom. So if we put the second rule first, and the firewall was evaluating the traffic coming through, and it says, well, my first rule says block all that traffic, and it blocks it, it would never get to the rest of the rules that would allow the traffic. So you always put your allowed traffic or more specific traffic at the top of the firewall, and then your more general blocks go at the bottom. So it'd be useful to have that there. Another in the chat room, people are saying, if you want the logs, would you not end the rule with log? There are some firewalls where log is a tuple that is contained there, but implicit denies, usually you don't control it. Implicit denies are just traffic that's lost. It's not logged at all. So in many firewalls, just having the rule effectively logs that traffic. In fact, I have some customers that would have put source any block. So they do a block of any traffic all the way across. So they would log everything that was blocked on their firewall. Could you imagine what type of log that was? It was enormous. But for them, they were a high security site. So for them, that was incredibly important to have those there. So whenever you work through those, it would be pretty specific. The reason we used any as our tuple there is the question specifically asked, block all other traffic from the management server. Some firewalls require you to put a range. Maybe they require you to put a large mask. This firewall allowed you to put any, and I would accept any of those for what we are doing here. Now on your test, you'll probably have a drag and drop, or you have a pull down list that you could choose from. So you'll know exactly what will go in there. There's not going to be any messages or worries about that. So well done stepping through a firewall question with me. I know that one took a little bit more time than usual. We'll do a couple bonus questions at the end to make up for it, I promise, so that we'll have that there. I could talk about firewalls all day long, but we're not going to. We're going to keep this going. That was your performance-based question of the month. Let's do a multiple choice-based question of the month, just like on the actual exam. The next question asks, let me click it on my side so you can see it there. 14 laptops are expected to be stolen from an organization over the next 12 months. Which of the following would describe the total cost of these thefts? Would it be ALE? Would it be ARO? Would it be AAA? Would it be SLE? Or would it be MFA? All 5 of those are real things, by the way, in this list. So you do want to don't be caught by something you think is not real. They're all real. If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer at professormesser.com/QA. Please do not put your answer in the chat room. You want to be sure to put your answer right there at professormesser.com/QA if you're watching this live. So we've estimated in our organization, 14 laptops are expected to be stolen over the next 12 months. It is the nature of an organization that has laptops. Laptops will get stolen. It is a fact of life. And so we have estimated that the laptops that will be stolen are going to be 14 of them. So which of these, if we want to do some estimates, we're going to have to do some budgeting. How much is that going to cost us? What would be the total cost of those thefts? Would it be ALE, ARO, AAA, SLE, and MFA? Those are your 5 possible answers to have that there. Might be something to look at. Where can you find more of those firewall questions to work out on your own? I'm glad you asked. We'll talk in a moment about Professor Messer's practice exam book. It's big. That's one place to go, although there are some free options as well. I'll ask that question in the after show because I will show you how to find free firewalls on the internet that you can use to help study for Security Plus and look at logs, which people love to be able to do. People are very worried about the logs. There's some free firewalls running right now, and I'll show you how to find those in a moment. I'm not sure people that have the firewalls really, really want me saying that, but they are the ones that put them out there. So we're gonna work through that. Do all firewalls work like access control lists? Very similar to yes. They all have an ACL is not a Cisco switch or router thing. People associate ACLs with those because that's a popular way of implementing them. But an ACL is a very generic term. For instance, Microsoft Windows has ACLs in it. Linux has ACLs. Firewalls have ACLs. Firewalls, we generally call them security rules, security policies, but it's an ACL. That's what that is, to have those there. Let's see how you did with this question. Let's see how you lock these in. The question was 14 laptops are expected to be stolen from an organization over the next 12 months. Which of the following would describe the total cost of these thefts? 63% of us say that it is ALE, first one on the list. 15% said ARO, and almost a tie, 14% SLE. Now it's an actual tie. Only 6% said MFA, and a mere 3% said AAA on these. So the real question is calculating risk. And you will find situations on the exam where you do need to calculate risk. The calculation of this risk is done through a couple of different ways. This is one where when you start getting into the details of it, you need to start looking at how likely is this problem going to be. So we have this situation on this question. We think we're going to lose 14 laptops in the next 12 months. Then you have to figure out our annualized rate of occurrence for these laptops being stolen. We have 14 instances. That is the rate, the ARO for those. A single loss expectancy would be how much money we're going to lose for every one of those that is stolen. And so, for example, to make our calculations very easy, let's say a laptop that is stolen costs us $1,000. So you've got now, we know that what the loss expectancy is, and we know how many times that happens. So if we combine those, multiply them together, if we have 7 laptops stolen in a year times 1,000, it's $7,000. That is our annual loss expectancy, which is exactly the number that we were looking for, the annual loss expectancy. And in fact, 62% of you absolutely got that correct. It is the ALE, the annual loss expectancy. We talked about the ARO and we talked about the SLE. The multi-factor authentication has nothing to do with losing laptops, and a AAA server for our authentication doesn't have anything to do with any of this either. So you do have to know what these abbreviations are, but perhaps more importantly, and this is a very good example of this, on the exam, you need to know more than what those letters stand for. Knowing what the acronym is or what the acronym stands for isn't quite as important as knowing how you would apply that acronym to what we do. So many acronyms in Network Plus and Security Plus. We just use the acronyms when we're talking to other people. If I'm giving a presentation on the next generation firewall in front of a room of 600 people, I'm using those acronyms because those people already know what those things are. You will be expected to know those as well. Otherwise, you won't be able to understand a word of what the person in front of the room is saying. It becomes pretty important to be able to do that. So again, if you answered A, the annual loss expectancy, or ALE, you got that one absolutely right. Let's try another one. Let's get away from loss expectancy. Let's get away from math completely. Would that be good? Here's a question about VPNs. This question asks, a VPN communication uses RSA to create and validate a digital signature. Which of the following would best describe this process? So we've got a VPN communication using RSA to create and validate a digital signature. Which of the following would best describe this process? Would it be block cipher? Would it be hashing? Would it be key stretching? Would it be obfuscation? Or would it be asymmetric encryption? Those are your 5 different options to choose from. VPN communication uses RSA to create and validate a digital signature. Which of the following would best describe this process? Is it block cipher, hashing, key stretching, obfuscation, or asymmetric encryption? And if you think you know what the answer is, please no answers in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA. And for Noel, who just got here, we have not done the monthly word credit yet. You're just in time. We haven't gotten quite that far yet. For those, lock in your answer, professormesser.com/QA. This video will be saved later. It will be available immediately afterwards. It takes a couple of minutes for YouTube to do its processing, and then it is available immediately afterwards on YouTube. You don't have to wait for me to upload anything. We just take the same stream, unless something goes horribly wrong, and I edit out me not putting in the right IP addresses for a firewall, which I will not do. We'll leave it in there. So the video will be available right afterwards, and there is you wait about a day and you'll get the timestamps. Lori will put those in for you to have those available. The podcast, I have to take the video and edit out and separate them out into the regular show and the after show. So the podcast audio is usually available later on in the afternoon, usually about 4 or 5 hours. Occasionally it takes me until the next morning to get to that, depending on what is going on in my world, which sometimes can be a bit chaotic. Let's see how you did with this one. This is a good question because it's asking about a specific kind of technology, the RSA technology specifically. How did you answer this one? Let's see what you answered, and then we'll look to see what RSA is. 64% of you said asymmetric encryption. It's almost like the last question we got. 21% of you said that's hashing. That's what RSA is. And then 8% said block cipher, and then a tie for fourth at 3% between key stretching and obfuscation, an actual word that people have to say out loud to other people. RSA, we should first start there. What is this RSA thing that this question is talking about? Rivest, Shamir, and Edelman. This is the RSA cipher. It's been around since 1977. About 40 years we have used the RSA cipher. If you're trying to find the very first example of somebody using public key cryptography, it's RSA. It allows to encrypt data, decrypt. There's digital signatures associated with this. Very useful to have that. It's based on prime numbers, as much of the public key cryptography algorithms tend to be, because it's so difficult to do calculations of large prime numbers. So this is one that took advantage of that so that people could create that. These days, it's not something that is kept private. It's released into the public domain. If you're doing anything on the web these days, there'll be some flavor of RSA that you're working with inside of those. And as this mentions being a public key cryptography system, that means that you have a public key and you have a private key. And that type of encryption is asymmetric. The public key and the private key are different keys. And so one key that you would use to encrypt is different than the key that you use to decrypt, which makes no sense. But there it is. If we did not have that crazy technology, we wouldn't have the internet as it exists today. That is asymmetric encryption, what other people might call public key cryptography. And that is why 65% of you saying that RSA creating and validating a digital signature is using asymmetric encryption. Answer E is the correct answer. From the chat room, the question was, do digital signatures always use asymmetric encryption? Well, they certainly use asymmetric encryption because if you were to digitally sign something with one key, someone would have to have that same key to be able to validate the digital signature. And that defeats the purpose of that digital signature. If everybody had the key, they could sign it and say, you really signed it. So because you're signing it with your private key and nobody else has your private key, that means that people can test it with your public key and know that it really came from you. Pretty useful to have that there. So not bad to have that functionality. The question, would it not be key stretching since they're using VPNs? VPNs don't necessarily use key stretching. In fact, I'm not aware of any offhand that do. But the question specifically asked, the VPN was thrown in here sort of as an odd thing to have in this list. It was really talking about using RSA to create and validate a digital signature. We could have just as easily said a person on a web server is using RSA to create and validate a digital signature. A person on a database server is using RSA to create and validate a digital signature. So the focus here was RSA, and the focus was using it to create and validate a digital signature. So to be able to have that. Wait, doesn't security encryption involve programming? Thankfully, no, it does not. I mean, there is obviously some programming somebody did, but I don't have to worry about it because they already did the programming, which is kind of nice. Don't have to get into any of the programming aspects. By the way, IT security has almost really no programming associated with it. There is scripting, there is automation, but there's no programming. What? That's correct. It's one of those interesting things of our industry. We sort of combine all of these things together. There was that big push years ago where everybody should learn how to program, learn to code, learn to make an app. And to my point was, why in the world would I do that? Well, that's an awful idea. I am not at all interested in programming, and the bulk of IT, security, networking, server administration, database has nothing to do with programming. So I'm not sure. It's one of those things where people who don't know technology will tell you need to know how to program, when the reality is, why in the world would I want to do anything like that? So that's one of those. We can talk more about in the after show about that. But having seen the industry myself, that's what I think is really the focus. By the way, automation and Python and scripting, you absolutely need to know. You need to know it's solid. You need to know Perl. You need to know scripting in the shell. You need to know all those different kinds of automation techniques, which I don't put into the category of programming. I consider that to be automation or scripting because that's really what it is. So let's keep this going. I mentioned earlier that someone's mentioning, where can I get more performance-based questions like that firewall question we just did? Well, I have them. I created an entire book that is nothing but practice exams. I created a set of exams that, in my opinion, emulates the type and the distribution of questions that you would get on the actual Security Plus exam based on the percentages that CompTIA gives us on their exam objectives. It's 3 practice exams. Each one of them is 90 questions apiece. Each one of them has 5 different performance-based questions. So there are 15 performance-based questions in this book. There would be another 85 times 3 multiple choice-based questions. I not only have the questions themselves, but I have detailed answers for all of them. So let me give you an example of what we have. I have my practice exams book up right here with all these questions in it. Let's do one. So this one says on A22, the embedded OS in a company's time clock appliance is configured to reset the file system and reboot when a file system error occurs. On one of the time clocks, this file system error occurs during the startup process and causes the system to constantly reboot. This loop continues until the time clock is powered down. Which of the following best describes this issue? Is it DLL injection? Is it resource exhaustion? Is it a race condition? Or is it weak configuration? And if you want to have a look at what the answers are, you can go to the details and just click on it. And it takes you right to the details of this particular question. There's the question again. The answer, for those of you picking along here, is C, race condition. And I give you all the details. I give you a complete explanation of why it is the race condition. Now, unlike other tests you may have taken, I also go through all of the incorrect answers, and I tell you why each of the incorrect answers was incorrect, which is the thing that drives me crazy on tests, is that I see why that answer is right. Why were those other answers wrong? So for every single question, I give you why the other answers are wrong. And lastly, I do go through here and go through the list of showing you where you may be able to click to be able to see the video that talks about this. You can also go through this list and be able to, if you have a QR code reader, in fact, you can do it right now, grab your phone, and you can pull up your camera, just point your camera right there, and it will go through and be able to do that. So pretty useful to have those. Whenever I start looking at what I am doing with questions and answers, I think this is a great way to go about doing it. So you should go about looking at it as well. This is something you'd be interested in. You can find out more about it at professormesser.com/securitype. That's security practice exams. And just as with my course notes, I also have, here we go, the physical version. So Mrs. Professor Messer likes a book. It's a 400-page book. These are big practice exam questions. There, you'll be spending a lot of time reading about all of this. So have a look and see what you think about those at professormesser.com. You can learn more about all those practice exams and everything else associated with that. Have a look. And let's do some more questions, though. I've got plenty more questions to go through. Well, as you start going through and looking at the type of questions that are available, there are different kinds from different technologies. So here's a good example of what this might be. A question asks, a check of web server logs shows a single IP address attempting to gain access by using exploits that were disclosed more than 12 months ago. Which of the following would best describe this threat actor? So this is one where we have a list of options available. It's a multiple choice question. The options are hacktivist, nation state, script kiddie, insider, or organized crime. Those are your different answers. If you think you know the answer, lock it in at professormesser.com/QA. Please don't put the answer into the chat room. You'll be able to put all of those into that list. This is one where you have a choice because a check of web server logs is showing a single IP address attempting to gain access by using exploits that were discovered more than 12 months ago. Which of the following would best describe this threat actor? Would it be a hacktivist? Would it be a nation state? Would it be a script kiddie? Would it be an insider? Or would it be organized crime? This question is a bit subjective, but only to the point when you get to the end of the question, because it asks which of the following would best describe this threat actor. So it gets rid of all the type of subjectiveness right there. We know that it's not even the case to be able to have that there. There's only one in this list that really is the best. And I don't think it's subjective at all. I think the answer should jump right out at you and be very obvious when you start looking through all of these things. That might help you as well as you're going through. In fact, it's a good example because you will run into this. I'm sure there are people hitting my servers right now as we're speaking that are doing exactly this. So that is one. So that is true. A lot of people say, well, you keep putting that in there. Which would best describe? Which would be the most? Which would be that type of thing? Because that's how the Security Plus exam is written. It's not really my thing. It's not really me putting it in there. These are the types of questions you will get on the actual exam that have that different piece of it and having the capability there. So hopefully it'll jump out at you as well to have those pieces. The wording is, as you said in the chat room, TJ, the wording is so important to have this here. The Security Plus exam, almost a reading comprehension exam as much as it is a technical exam. Be ready. You saw an example of one of those. That single question I got from my practice exam book is pretty common on the Security Plus exam. Not all of them are that big. I chose a very long one, which is probably my fault. Some are very short. So some of them are single sentence in the practice exam book, but some are nice and long. So I'm glad I got to give you an example of what some of those might happen to be in there. And one of the things I've noticed on the exam that is different from the sample test that I've seen is a lot of sample tests will ask you what something is not. I don't find that the CompTIA exams do a lot of that at all. I think they've intentionally stayed away from it. So you don't get a lot of which of these is not true. Yeah, you don't get that. They're very careful at keeping things very close. Let's see how you did with this one. A check of web server log shows a single IP address attempting to gain access by using exploits that were discovered more than 12 months ago, which, by the way, is a lifetime ago in the world of security. Which of the following would best describe this threat actor? We have 79% of you say script kiddie, 9% said hacktivist, 9% said insider, 2% organized crime, and 1% said nation state. It's a vast majority that say C, script kiddie. As I mentioned, it should have jumped right out at you, and for 79% of you, it really did seem to jump out at you completely. It was the real hook in here was the thing that said these exploits were discovered more than 12 months ago. That is remarkable. To have anything in here that was over 12 months ago. It's crazy to have something in here over that period of time. So feel free as you're looking through these and figuring out where this would come from. It would be the script kiddies doing this. The script kiddies are the ones that are completely non-complex. They're not using anything that is remarkable. It's not even the latest. They don't understand what they're doing. They have no idea what that can be. So whenever you start working through these and trying to figure out what type of threat is this, the script kiddie is one that would absolutely be the case for doing something like that. Whenever I start going through all of these and trying to figure out where do I break this down, I want to go back to the question, because the question says a single IP address. So already we know it's not going to be very complex. This is somebody that is not doing a lot of complex things with this. But we do know that when we're working through it, that it's not going to be a nation state. Nation states probably are going to use many different IP addresses to have that there. Whenever you start breaking it down, insiders are going to be maybe a single IP address, but they're not going to use vulnerabilities that were disclosed 12 months ago. As I mentioned, that's a lifetime. And they already know what the vulnerabilities are. So why would they bother with vulnerability? They already know where all of those problems are in this. So script kiddies really is the best answer here. The 79% of you chose that one. Absolutely the one it should be. It could be a process of elimination. It has to be in this question because I asked you what the best option is, which means therefore you have to go through and look at all of the options to be able to break this down. So you effectively are doing something like that. Now, how do you graduate from being a script kiddie? Folks in the chat room are wondering. Well, if you have to ask, you haven't graduated yet. I don't know. I don't know what if you have any type of, you do gain knowledge, you will not be a script kiddie any longer. I guess that's the right answer, isn't it? So that's one that should be very obvious to you. If you're now understanding how these threats work, if you now are understanding how these are implemented and you know how to stop them, then suddenly you can say that you've graduated out of the script kiddie. We all start as script kiddies, right? We're all trying different things. How did that work? What is that about? And we dig into it. If you're someone who digs into it and you're figuring it out, yeah, then you're not a script kiddie, as Rick says in the chat room. You're a script adolescent, I guess. Is that how it works? I don't think so. I don't think that's how it works. Let's do another question. Oh, by the way, if you are watching this for continuing education unit credit, then one of the things that you could do is receive an email from me saying you must have watched this. You can do this whether you're watching this live or on the replay. What you want to do is follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, and you want to choose the Contact Us link. That's the one. Contact Us. It will bring up a form, and on that form, you want to put your first and last name. You want to put your email address. Make sure it's right because I'm sending you an email back. See how that works? In the subject line, if you would be nice enough to say that this is the February 2020 Security Plus study group, and in the body of the message on a single line, please put the word script kiddie. That's what we're going to put down. Script kiddie is our super secret code word of the month. And you can put anything else you would like in there as well. It's an email that's sent to me directly. I process these and send them out to be able to get there. Absolutely, you can do something like that. In the chat room, if you're keeping a list of these super secret code words, you can send a few at a time to get the credits. You could do them all at the same time to get the credit. That's completely up to you to be able to do that. It's easier for me if you send them one at a time using that process because the automated process I have can really say, I can validate it, see that it's correct, and I click one button and in a second it's emailed back to you. If you're doing multiples of these in a single message, it's a manual process with me. So it may take you a little extra time to receive that. What can you do with these credits? CEUs, Continuing Education Unit credits, can be used to renew your CompTIA certifications along with certifications from other places as well. It doesn't have to be CompTIA. A lot of places will use this, the CEUs to be able to do that. So you can watch replays or live. Doesn't matter which one works for you. And I like you to get that email so you have something to show if they happen to audit you and say, did you really watch that super secret code word nonsense? Yes, I did. Here's the email, because you know how they know that you really did it? I digitally signed the email. So they can validate the email by checking my digital signature and know that it had to come from me and nobody else. How about that? Have those things there. A real practical use of a digital signature. That's what that attachment will be when you receive it, is the digital signature. Have those things there. Not using RSA in my case. I'm using PGP for the digital signatures, which is its own algorithm that combines a lot of different things inside of it. Let's continue on. I've got more questions. We're going to do a couple more at least, since we spent so much time on that firewall question originally. This next question, let's see if you folks know this one. This question asks, which of the following would be the best way to obtain the banner of a local web server? Which of the following would be the best way to obtain the banner of a local web server? For those of you thinking, I love that term best. I do. Well, CompTIA loves it. They don't all have that in there, but most of the time I try to put that in so you can get a feel for it. Which of the following would be the best way to obtain the banner of a local web server? Would it be ipconfig? Would it be traceroute? Would it be ping? Would it be TCP dump? Would it be netstat? It may not be the answer I was looking for. I may not have put the answer that number one you would probably come to your mind immediately and go, oh, I would use, wait, it's not in this list. Which, by the way, is exactly how CompTIA does it. Usually the thing that you think is the most common or the most obvious answer, they don't put in their list, because not always is the most common and most obvious answer something that is available. Sometimes you don't have all the tools available that you like to have. You only have these 5 tools. Which one would you use to have those things there? Let's see if you know the answer. If you do, lock in your answer at professormesser.com/QA. Can have all of those there. See if you happen to know what this one happens to be. Having these tools, this is one of those situations where you might not have your laptop with you. You may only have machines that are at that facility. They may not allow you to download and install applications from the internet. You just may not have that choice. You may have this limited number of things, or you may be connecting through a different server or a different router, and that server or router has a limited number of tools available to it. So all of those things. Question, we'll talk about some of these in the after show. This is a question about needing how to subnet for your security career. You need to know everything about networking to be an IT security. You need to be a networking expert. You really do. I can talk more about that in the after show if you'd like, but it becomes incredibly important to know that. If your screen is blurry, you can click your at the bottom of the screen. There's a cog wheel, and you can click that and change the resolution if you'd like. I send a single stream to YouTube, and what you are receiving is a stream sent to you from YouTube. So you're not actually seeing my stream. You're seeing the one that YouTube is sending to you. So if you're seeing a blurry screen, if it's stuttering, it's something between you and YouTube. So something weird is going on with that. Right now, all my messages on my site say the stream is healthy, which I guess is good. It sounds kind of odd, but yes, it's healthy. Things look okay on this side. We'll keep it going with that, see how it worked. Absolutely. Oh, 7-second subnetting help you. That's good too. That's another, we can talk about how 7-second subnetting came about and why security needs so much networks and networking on it. We'll talk about that in just a bit. So let's have a look at how you did. The question was, which of the following would be the best way to obtain the banner of a local web server? Wow. Almost a tie exactly for first between TCP dump and netstat. Those are the 5. For the 2 different ones, number 4 and number 5. Number D and number E, letter 4 and number 5. We have ipconfig at 6%, ping at 6%. Oh, we had traceroute at 9%, now 10. So these are the 2 that you have to choose from, TCP dump or netstat. So this is one where, which one of these would it be? Well, we know netstat is what we would use on a local machine to be able to see who's connecting to it and who that machine is connecting to. We would be able to see how many sessions are active on that machine and what applications are using those sessions. It's a good example of netstat. But what netstat doesn't show you is banner information. Whenever you connect to a service across the internet, even though you don't see it in your browser, there's a whole conversation taking place over the network behind the scenes. And one of the first things that you'll see is a message that is sent back and forth from a server saying, oh, thank you for connecting to me. I'm web server Apache version 2.23 Rev 4. I'm ready for your commands. Here's a very good example of a banner. I just gave you an audio banner of a web server. That banner can be really important if you're doing some reconnaissance of a network, because you want to be able to know, what is that machine doing? Oh, it's a web server? Wonder what web server software it's using. And simply by connecting, it tells you, oh, I'm running Apache version 2.21 Rev 3. Now all you have to do is look at the list of vulnerabilities available in Apache version 2.21 Rev 3, and now you use those vulnerabilities against that server and gain access. That's the value of a banner. It's also a good reason to make your banners very generic, which would be, if it was my network, I'd change the banner and it would say, thanks for connecting to web. That's it. That's all you get. or maybe even less than that. Thanks for connecting. So that's it. Has nothing there to be able to pull from. So the only option here that would allow us to see what's going on is one that would allow us to see the packets themselves. And one of the tools that allows us to do that is TCP dump. It's a great tool to be able to do this. Captures packets at the command line, be able to pull these things up and be able to see them. Makes me long for the days of my network administration where I would look at all of this data going over the network. I liken it to someone who is managing the matrix. You're watching these packets go by, and after a while, you start to see the patterns, and you start to see the differences, and you start to see the errors and the messages that you were not expecting. It's one that does become very useful to have that capability there. There's a TCP dump available in Linux. There's a TCP dump available in Mac OS. There's a TCP dump, although it's called WinDump, available in Windows. Windows is a little bit complicated to be able to run applications like this, but Wireshark is a very good example of what people might use in Windows to perform exactly the same functionality. Wireshark. Wireshark is it's not TCP dump. Think of it as it has its own capture engine, but it has great capabilities to be able to do that and those functionalities. TCP dump goes back to Unix days, really. And now it's available in Linux, Mac OS. Well, Mac OS effectively is Unix, right? So got a lot of capabilities there. The difference between Wireshark and TCP dump, effectively the graphical interface and the command line interface, although Wireshark also has a CLI available for Wireshark too. So that's what they are. I wouldn't call TCP dump an analyzer as much as it just allows you to see the data. Usually, if you want more analysis of the data, and I put a protocol analyzer into the category of something that's really analyzing the data and telling you more about it, I would take that data out of TCP dump and I would really import it into an actual sniffer or into Wireshark and have it calculate more information about those. So pretty useful to have that functionality. I use this all the time. It's a great validation of the things that are allowing you to see what is going on for those. Pretty useful to have that there. So TCP dump is your answer. If you answered D and you wanted to see the banner of a local web server given these 5 tools, TCP dump is the only one that would be able to show that information to you. 39% of you chose TCP dump. That is the right answer. If you want to see TCP dump, here's some output for TCP dump. See how obvious that is? It's a little crazy. It's a lot there. So having all of those things there becomes a little bit crazy. Pretty useful to have the TCP dump capabilities, though. That's one that you're going to use a lot. If you're moving from networking, you've already been using TCP dump. It makes a fantastic security tool as well to have those things and make it happen. Let's do some more. I know we ran out. We talked so much about the firewall, and I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's go into an after hours here. We're going to after innings and see if we can get another question in that asks, a security administrator needs to prevent unauthorized access to cloud services. Which of the following would provide this type of control? A security administrator needs to prevent unauthorized access to cloud services. Which of the following would provide this type of control? Would it be a CASB? Would it be an IPS? Would it be a VDI? Would it be a SIM? Would it be DLP? 5 real things. I didn't make those up. Those are real things. Would it be a CASB? Would it be an IPS? Would it be a VDI? Would it be a SIM? Would it be DLP? If you think you know the answer, lock it in at professormester.com/QA. Get it in there. Figure it out. What's the answer? Where would it come from? Where would it be? You could figure those things out. There's a bunch of cloud stuff in A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. So make sure as you're going through these, you're kind of figuring out. Please, no hints in the chat room. No choices in the chat room. No options in the chat room. We're figuring this out. All those things I mentioned, yes, all 5 of those are from the Security Plus exam objectives. Absolutely, it could be. So figure out the details of what that happens to be. You might be able to break all of those down. Yes, They're not something I made up. Those are all 5 real things from the exam. Somebody mentioned this in the chat room. What a good point. This must be a new topic you've not seen in the 401 exam. Why in the world are you studying from the 401 content? Please don't do that. About 60% of the 501 exam is new, brand new over the 401 exam. That's a massive number. Usually the update is about 20% new content. The 501 exam, completely different, completely revamped. Well, 60% different, 60% brand new, actually more than 60% different. But please, please, please do not study from 401 materials. You will be very shocked when you sit for the exam and realize 60% of the exam are things you never looked at. Yes, 60% is a huge number. And I know that because I looked at every single exam objective and listed them out. I compared them to every single exam objective on the 401, and I calculated that number. I can even give you the exact number. Let's see if I have it. I can't do it on here. Let's see if I break this out. Put it over here. Look at another thing. Do I have my 501? Yeah, 401 to 501 comparison. If I look at the numbers, there were 758 topics, as I count them, on the 501 exam. 466 of them were brand new, giving us a 61.48% difference. There you go. So that is where I got those. I put those. I know it's kind of an odd thing that I calculated exactly what that is, but it is a common option. A common question that's asked of me. Plus, it's helpful for me to know when I'm telling people how important it is to have the latest materials. 60% is a number that should shock people, and that's why. To have those there and make them available. Pretty useful to have that there. Let's see how you did on this question that asked, a security administrator needs to prevent unauthorized access to cloud services. Which of the following would provide this type of control? 53%. We just hit the majority there. Say it's CASB, first option on the list. 23% said IPS is what you would use. 12% SIM. Yes, that's the way it would be. 6% VDI and 5% DLP. There's a lot to choose from here. CASB seems to be the one that most people think would be the way to prevent unauthorized access, and the important term here, unauthorized access to cloud services. Now, this is a real problem, obviously. Think about this. Everything used to be local on our network. It was in our data center, and we could set up routers, firewalls. We could turn on an IPS. We could turn on and manage policies across our network using those tools. Now we took everything that was local and we stuck it in the cloud. Now it's in the cloud. How in the world are we supposed to set policies on these things? We needed a new way to do this. CASB absolutely is in the acronyms. It's not in the acronyms, but it's in the exam objectives. So don't worry, you folks that are looking at the acronyms, which, by the way, is not where you should be looking. You'll figure out the acronyms by looking at the exam objectives. CASB is the solution to this. It's a new type of security technology we've created just for the cloud, which allows us to be able to see what's going on, understand if people are complying with what we would like as our policies. In some cases, those policies are put upon us, like HIPAA, PCI, DSS. Threat prevention is part of CASB. You've got data security. You want to be sure all the data going to and from the cloud is encrypted. The data stored in the cloud is encrypted. The technologies that CASB is built around, and this is usually a mixture of hardware and software, allows us as a security professional to know that all of these things are happening, even if the data is out there in the cloud. Pretty useful technology to have. And that was the answer that you gave, which is the right one. Somebody's studying their 501 exam objectives and knowing that they are right there. The objectives, by the way, pretty important. We'll talk about that in a moment. IPS, a great tool to be able to find people trying to attack specific vulnerabilities on your network, but it doesn't help us prevent unauthorized access, and it doesn't help us with cloud services. It's not going to help us either. A SIM, The Security and Information Event Manager is another technology that's more of a log consolidation tool. It allows us to create reports, but it doesn't block anything. It does not prevent access to anything in the world. Nothing that's going to help us there. VDI and DLP. VDI, our virtual desktop interface or interactions or environment, even though it's not an E. A VDI environment is one where I am effectively using a remote control on my desktops, or a thin client as we call it, to be able to access a desktop that is located on a centralized server. Whenever we work through and have, at least from a security perspective, have everything in one place, it's so much easier to control and manage. So the virtual desktop infrastructure allows us to do that. DLP, data loss prevention, is one that is another usually software and hardware combination, although it can be just one of those. The DLP is looking for different types of traffic. It's looking for maybe things that are important to your and private to your network. It's looking for social security numbers. It's looking for credit card numbers. It's looking for something you don't want to go over the network, and that losing that data and preventing it is the point of data loss prevention, and having that and having all of those things there. Nice capability to have that, have everything in one place. And as folks in the chat room rightly say, isn't the cloud infrastructure just local somewhere else? It is. The problem is that all of your clients are not anymore. That is the big problem. So much easier when you know where all the clients are and you can control everything between the client and the server. What happens when you no longer have that control? And that's the biggest problem in the cloud, have all of those things there. That's a lot to go through. Tons of information on the exam. If you have not downloaded the exam objectives, you are doing yourself a disservice. These are absolutely free. CompTIA gives them to you. They tell you everything that is on the exam. If you want to have a master checklist, so you know as you step through it, here's everything I need to know, this is what you need. Go to professormesser.com/objectives to download them, or simply go to the Google machine, type in CompTIA exam objectives, and get the Security Plus objectives. So useful, so powerful. I go through this list and I checklist it myself to make sure every single one of these things is in the video course. I wish everybody did that. Or I guess I should say, I'm glad nobody else does that. I think maybe that's what I meant to say. To have those things there. They really should. I don't know why they don't. I have no control over that. Kind of how these things work. Well, we've gone through another hour, in this case, hour and 12 minutes of a study group. But I do one of these every month. And of course, you've got the entire archive to go through on the Professor Messer website. Next month, kind of weird with the scheduling, just like this month was kind of weird. Welcome to my world. Next Security Plus study group is going to be March 26th. Earlier that week, on that same week in March, on the 24th, is the Network Plus study group. And the week before, on the 17th and the 19th, are the Core 1 and Core 2 A Plus study groups on all of those March dates. So I kind of cram everything into 2 weeks. Sorry about that. I try to spread them out a little bit more, but that's okay. We'll get through March and April, whatever that craziness comes from there. We'll figure out all the details. We're not done, even though the Q&A part where I ask you questions is over. Now let's start the part where you ask me questions, the after show, where we talk about anything. We can talk about Security Plus. We can talk about technology. We can talk about what I'm playing on the Xbox. We can talk about the weather. It's completely up to you. Of course, don't forget about your Security Plus pop quiz. We've got one every week out on the Twitter, professormesser.com/Twitter. We always tell people, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you like these videos. Make sure you thumb up. Click the bell if you want notifications. And the reason for that, if you've ever wondered why everybody emphasizes that, this is what YouTube looks at to see if it's something that they need to be interested in. And thanks to you and you clicking those thumbs up, and thanks to you watching the videos, and thank you for subscribing to the channel, I now have monthly meetings with YouTube where they say, here's things that are happening. They've allowed me to participate in betas of new technologies and products they have coming out, thanks to you. So if you have not subscribed, you've not clicked those thumbs up, please do it. It does go a long way on this side, and I really do appreciate it. We've got also, don't forget the Security Plus course notes and exams. Just go to the Professor Messer website. Under the Security Plus menu, you'll see the options for all of those. And of course, one thing you can do to support us for free, whenever you buy anything from Amazon, go to professormesser.com Amazon. Well, that brings us to the end of this first hour. Thanks for being here. Stick around for hour number 2, and we thank you for joining us on the Security Plus study group. Let's see if I can get this. There we go. Back the way it should be. Let's get the phone lines open, and then I will tell you all about how to call in, and then I'll take some of these questions from the chat room so that we can do some of that as well. Speaking of the cloud, I have to call into my own cloud-based service. I have software as a service that is the actual call-in part. So this is another opportunity for me to take advantage of software as a service. Let's see if I can get this going. One moment, please, as I Skype into my own calls. Let's click a button. It's going to make some noises here. There it is. And it wants me to type a thing, and I mute it so you people can't do the decode. And then I put in a PIN number, which I understand is redundant. Thank you for your calls and letters.
Welcome.
Welcome. And she's talking to you, of course. Welcome. If you are in the continental United States, you can call me for free. It's a toll-free number, 855-785-RJ45. West of the Rockies is 855-785-7545. If you are outside of the continental United States, you can still call me for free because it's a toll-free number, and you can call a toll-free number for free on Skype with no Skype minutes. Simply put a +1 at the beginning, +1 855-785-7545. I also take questions from the chat room. Feel free to have questions roll up in there. We've had a few come in. There were some I asked some of you to put back in there. We can talk about some of those as well. So could I explain the difference between Security Plus and CEH? Security Plus and CEH, the Certified Ethical Hacker. Two pretty different certifications. There's kind of a different focus on those two certifications. I would not call them interchangeable in any way. CEH tends to have an emphasis in more of a practical use of some of the tools that we talked about earlier. Whereas Security Plus might ask you, in what cases would you use Nmap? CEH might ask you in its full form, because there's really two parts of CEH. There's kind of a multiple choice version and a practical version. And the practical version says, how can I actually use Nmap? Use Nmap to do this. And I have to know how to the command line to use Nmap to make that happen. I don't know about the difficulty. I've never taken the Certified Ethical Hacker. As I mentioned on other study groups, the folks that manage the CEH exam have had challenges through the years in keeping information private. They've had exploits of their system, and people's private information was released. And I've just seen no evidence that, at least I don't know of any difference that has happened. It made me a little bit wary of giving them my personal information. If you'd like to get a good example of that, just Google CEH and Snowden, and you'll be able to see Edward Snowden's passport picture and content. The last thing I want is my passport information out on the internet. And so although I like all of the information that is in the CEH, I like the content of the CEH. I like where they're coming from. I personally can't bring myself to give them that information for me to take the exam. And I would not, the reason I don't create content for it is if I can't take the exam, I'm not going to in any way promote you taking the exam. Now, does that mean that you taking that exam is your information is going to be released? Probably not. I would hope at this point that they've gotten their security stuff in order, but I'm not associated with CH. I've never talked to them about this. I only know what's happened in the industry in the past. And I know how I feel about my personal information somehow getting out. It just was a thing. That was not something I wanted to get involved with. So that's the reason I can't really give you a good description or explanation. Is one harder or easier than the other? So because I haven't. So it's that, I don't think that's too controversial, but it's maybe disappointing. I'd love to take their exam. I'm very interested in the content that's there. As I mentioned, I think their exam objectives are pretty nice. I read through their exam objectives. They're pretty spot on. They're the things you would need to know how to do if you were working as an IT professional. You need to know how to use those tools. So it's one of those situations where it's unfortunate, but that's sort of where we are. It tends to be a very polarizing certification. People either love the CEH or they don't like the CEH at all. There doesn't seem to be any middle ground with CEH. So I'm not sure what the alternative would be with that. There's so many different security certifications. And CompTIA has more security certifications now. There are others, probably, I don't know if CEH is one. I don't know that people do say it's used for HR hunting. Gets you through the HR filter. Well, of course, all certifications do that to some degree. But what did you learn? Did you learn how to use Nmap? That's pretty valuable. Did you learn how to use Netcat? That's a useful tool. Did you learn how to use TCP dump? That's something you will use every day. So those are the situations you run into. You have to make those decisions yourself and read through it, know what the risks are, plan for them, and maybe you'll decide that's something you want to do. That should be a decision you make. Let's go to the phone calls to the 410 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Oh, see? You need to listen into the phone and not the stream. So, see, that's how that works.
I'm from Maryland.
Oh, thanks for calling. What's your question?
I was wondering where you can find examples of virus scripts.
Well, that's a good question. And as someone who has worked at Network Associates, which was the company that was created with the combination of McAfee and Network General. McAfee Associates, Network General created Network Associates, and I became a systems engineer doing antivirus, firewalls, intrusion prevention, and a lot of different things. The control of viruses in the industry is extremely tight. They do not allow people like me, a systems engineer out in the field, communicating with customers and helping them with their technologies, to have any access to viruses. Now, it may sound crazy because if you want a virus, pull up a Windows machine that's not patched, and you'll have one shortly, which is true. But the way that you manage viruses, the way that you control where the virus goes, how it is handled, is incredibly important, because if you do the wrong things, like a real virus, it suddenly spreads and it suddenly gets on machines it was not intended to get on, and already a bad situation. So the answer is, where do you get those? I don't recommend you start working with live viruses and working through those. But if you are someone who is getting into kind of the computer science side of technology, which is very different than Security Plus, but you want to take an executable of a virus, you want to break it out and have a look, disassemble the code, have a look at the machine language, step through what that virus is doing at that level. There are jobs for people that do that kind of thing, working with those antivirus companies in Silicon Valley. So those are great things to note. They're well outside the scope and not even approaching what people would do at an IT security level. That's a completely different world of programming and computer science. And as I've mentioned before, those are two different worlds. Programming and computer science on one side, IT on the other side. There's not a lot of overlap between those two. And that's not one that you would ever want to get into. Whenever you start working with viruses, you never want to be in that situation where you're having to break down and figure out how to manage a virus. So I don't recommend you do any of that. If you want a virus, you may just go out and find. There's plenty of places on the internet if you really want to get your hands on viruses. I would not recommend you do any of that. And I really do mean that. I don't think that's a good idea for anyone to be getting into, unless you are working with somebody in the industry who does this for a living, who can walk you through that, which I was fortunate of being able to have that experience. And it's remarkable. And it made me realize I do not want to get into understanding machine language and viruses. That was easy. That was the simple way for me to go about doing it. Let's go to the Ukraine, or just Ukraine, as I have been told many times in emails and messages. Hello, caller. Yeah. What's your name? Where are you calling from? little bit of a delay there. Make sure you listen into the phone and not the stream.
Yes, Professor. I'm calling from Ukraine.
Thanks for calling. What's your question?
I have been following you for all these 7 years, almost like 5 years ago.
Thank you so much.
My name is Amadou. I'm from Gambia.
You might want to listen into the phone. You're going to hear a bit of an echo there.
Science, third year.
So what's your question? Thank you for calling also. What's your question?
Okay, the question is I'm more interested on this thing. I was studying cybersecurity on Udemy, also cybersecurity, networking security, all of those things in one package. So I would like your advice, or what do you think about that? Because if you are not having it in the universities or any other, but you are having it Udemy and other websites, how can you advise in those things and how legit they are in terms of searching for jobs and all of those things? How would you advise into that?
It's a good question and it comes up quite often as well, because the scope of IT security is broad. And then there's the other parts of security. I just gave you a very good example of kind of what people might consider the cybersecurity part of it, which is sort of a weird term because there is no such thing as a cyber that you would secure. And it's become kind of a catch-all for anything relating to anything in security, which doesn't really help the industry and doesn't help employers and doesn't help you as someone trying to get a job. I would recommend you kind of focus your efforts and break them out into the two separate containers. At least start with that. Whereas you've got the computer science side, somebody who wants to do development of security, somebody who wants to write applications, somebody who wants to disassemble code and understand how the viruses work. That's one side of security. The other side of security is the IT security side. It is the network security. It's someone who is interested in protecting the data that's on the network, somebody who's handling the firewalls, the VPNs, somebody who's managing the authentication process, who's parsing the logs, who's trying to understand how they can protect their network better, putting the CASB implementation in to protect the cloud-based services. That's the IT security side. Those types of technologies, those types of things, interestingly enough, are not taught, I think, at the formal education level, at the university and college level, as much as they should be. I think universities and colleges tend to float over to the computer science side. If you ever try to look at a college or university in your area that has an IT degree, often it will be put under the School of Engineering or the School of Computer Science, and it's taught as a computer science degree, which is really a disservice to the folks that will be doing this as their career, because you will end up doing very little computer science in your IT security career. Helps you a little bit, I guess, on the outside of things so that you know how to talk to programmers, but it doesn't help you much more than that, unfortunately. So one of the things I tell you, if you're looking for a job in doing something relating to this, I always say you need 4 things. You need a formal degree. And there are some places out there you can get good technology degrees. There are cloud degrees and technology degrees, very good things to be able to get a 2 or a 4-year degree. As I was having a conversation earlier this week with someone who said, I have a degree in business administration. Does that help me? Well, my degree's in business management. So I would say yes. I think you'd be fine with that type of degree. It does not have to be a technical degree. It helps if it is, but I'm living proof that that is not necessary to be able to do that. And I've worked with people, I don't recommend this, but I've worked with people in the industry that were remarkably successful, both professionally and financially, at having no college degree. So it's not all 4 of these things are have-to-haves, but they are nice-to-haves. The second is industry certifications. That's the reason I'm talking to you right now, because there is a value to learning the content that's in these certifications. There are so many places and opportunities in the world to be negative towards certification or think that there's no value, or the value is as an HR filter. And there's certainly places where that type of opinion is not at all invalid. That's a big problem and a challenge whenever you're trying to get a job, is trying to know what all those things happen to be. But one of the things that you will find is knowing the content as you're going through and learning the cert. That's the real important part. That's the valuable part. Yes, I know we're putting that certification name on your resume, and perhaps it will make it through an HR filter. But when it comes time for you to actually do the job, now you know how to do all of these things because you've already gone through the process of doing your hands-on. You've already used TCP dump. You've already played around with Nmap. You already know about how to use traceroute. Those are capabilities that these certifications give you. And I think often we skip over the fact that we actually learned something when we went through this exam, this high-pressure, expensive process, that we actually got something good for this. So that part was, I think, very useful. So there's your first two, a formal education and the industry certifications. Also, when looking for a job, this is one of those catch-22s, is I don't want to be in a situation where I have to ask somebody for or show somebody that I have some practical experience and I don't. But that's where it's really hard to get that practical experience. Having some type of practical technology experience can be really useful. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to have a previous job. It could be that you were an intern. It could be that you helped at a volunteer basis. It could be that you manage keeping all of the systems at your church or at a local nonprofit free of viruses. They're updated to the latest signatures. The operating systems are kept at the right versions. When there's a problem, you can help get someone in to solve the issues with the operating systems. Those can be useful as well. So those are the three things so far. We've got formal education, certification, some practical experience. And then the fourth thing that really becomes useful is knowing somebody who already works there. Now, that's kind of a thing you always hear about. It's not what you know, it's who you know. The reason there's a saying that says it's not what you know, but who you know, because it actually is who you know. There's a point to this. What you know is useful and it is important, but who you know is just as important. It is not an either or, it's really an added on to that list. One of the things I mentioned, if you're wanting to get a job in technology, you need to meet people who already have these jobs. And so I highly recommend you go to find some places that are a meeting group of these folks. Go to a Microsoft user group meeting. Go to a Cisco user group meeting. Go to a Palo Alto Networks user group meeting. Meet the people, and don't just go. Go there because you want to meet the folks. Be very comfortable at saying, hi, my name is, what's your name? Where do you work? What do you do? What do you do? Why are you here? As you're sitting there, you're having the pizza they give you, you're drinking the beer they give you, and hey, tell me more about what you do. I'm doing this. I'm trying to get a job. I'm trying to get into this industry. Where do you work? Oh, you work at that big place over on the other side of town. Yeah, I've heard of them. I would love to get into that help desk there. What do you think would be the minimum requirement I would need to get into the help desk? Have a conversation like that. I'm really interested in learning more about security and working up into a security role. What type of certifications do you think are valuable? Do you think I need to even worry about certifications in your organization? Some people, it doesn't matter. So those are the things that I would go through and work as I start going through the list of them, the things I would think about doing as well. Those are my four. Hopefully that will help you with the things you're doing as well and getting through those pieces of it. So in the chat room, some folks were going through and reminding me about some of the things we talked about earlier. So before we go back to the calls, I see your callers are holding there. Thank you for being patient. We're going to try to find some firewall systems, and I'm going to find some for you right now because I went to a remarkable tool that not nobody knows about. It's called Google. Now, the real secret of Google, of course, we all know what Google is, but the secret is to find the things that you would like to find. And I just typed in firewall demo online. That's all I did. That's all you need to type in. And you will find all of these companies that gladly put their firewalls out on the internet with live data going through them so that you can then use them. From SonicWall, Barracuda. Palo Alto Networks doesn't actually put theirs. You have to fill out a form and go to a meeting. That's not what I want. You can see some of the places I've even been. Barracuda, Fortinet, people. I pulled out a lot of their firewalls. So let's accept their cookies. Barracuda is a good one because they put them right out on the network. Let's do not the backup. Firewall F, cloud connected users, not exactly what I want. Load balancers, web application firewalls, which technically not a firewall. That's a WAF, not exactly what we were shooting for. Firewall Insights is the other thing. So we can go through these and have a look at their CloudGen firewall. You can view the demo. Takes you into a demo version of the firewall. This is just one example. I imagine all of you are now going through. You have to log in. It says username guest, password guest. Great. We'll just type that in. And now I'm in the firewall. And now I can go into the firewall, the administration of it. I can go through and look at all the different, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just clicking on things to give you a feel for here's what I did. Here's the Fortinet AV firewalls that is a reseller. Here's a FortiGate, FortiDemo login, username demo, password demo. Let's try that one. You can tell I've done a lot of preparation for this. They say, yeah, just log in as demo, which I apparently have because it's in my LastPass. So whenever I show things in my videos of an actual firewall and you want to see we're in a live, real enterprise firewall looking at what it's doing with real data going through it right now. So if you're someone who's feeling, I don't know if this is something, well, here it is. Let's see if we can find information. I mentioned earlier we had some setting up some policies, some rules in our firewall. Here's firewall rules. The number of the firewall, we'll give this firewall rule a name. From, which is an IP address. To, which is an IP address. Notice they use any up here too. Source, destination. Does this look at all familiar to something we did earlier? This one happens to have other tuples in here. We can schedule a rule to be available at certain times of the day. Certain services. This is something you'll see in firewalls now is instead of saying TCP or UDP and a port number, they combine it and just call it a service. Sometimes it may have applications in it. This one has other actions like accept or deny. Am I going to log this rule or not? How much traffic has gone through for that rule? If you want to see a rule, there's your rules in here. Are there logs? I'm sure there must be logs and reports under log and reports. Let's look at forwarded traffic. I don't know what I'm clicking on. I'm not accustomed to their firewalls. But here is a firewall log. Source, device, destination, application name, result, and the policy that it hit. So just a few clicks, and we were able to access a live firewall, look at some rules, go through the logs. I imagine there's a way to click on the log and get more detail. I would imagine. Details. Click. And there's the details of the log, which is something you might see in a Security Plus exam. Let me get rid of can I get rid of my big head? There. So there you go. You've got the log details there. And this is something, you might get a question on this. In this particular log entry on this firewall, what port number was used by the server? Well, then you'd have to know what port number you were looking at, where this was coming from. And here we've got the source from the client side. We've got the destination from the server side. Underneath it, there's the destination IP. So you can break out what all those happen to be, and you just go through this log file. What's going on? What went back and forth? Somebody going to GoDaddy, and somebody going to Facebook, and somebody going to another site. So that is a good example of what some of those things might be. You may have to hunt and peck around when you type in firewall demo online to find the thing that you would like. But the one I chose was the one at avfirewalls.com, which is probably a reseller Fortinet, which is probably not happy right now that I told everybody that was available on their site. But as I mentioned, They're the ones that put it on their site. If they don't want you there, they will change the demonstration and work through those pieces as well. Hopefully, that will help you as you're going through and trying to figure out all those details with firewalls. That's my recommendation for the month. So that should get you some interesting firewall stumbling, because that's the way you do it when you've never been on some of these firewalls before, is you stumble through them and figure out those details. Let's go back to the phone lines, to the 405 area code. Thanks for holding so long. Caller, which name are you calling from? Hi, thanks for holding. Sorry about that. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Darian. I'm calling from OKC, Oklahoma.
I appreciate you calling. What's your question?
I had my question partially answered by the dude from Ukraine, but my question was how does like dissecting malware and like reverse engineering overlap into security? But you kind of went over the just of it.
Perfect.
But I was wondering if you were implying that that you really don't like it's more of like a team role based environment.
Which environment? The one dealing with the viruses or the breaking out of the disassembly?
As far as like development, not development based, but just dissecting and reverse away from networking, basically, away from the network aspect.
Right. Yeah, those really are some pretty specific delineations between IT security and computer science, is what I'm going to just put in a very broad bucket of computer science. IT security folks who are managing and keeping data safe, they're managing the antivirus signatures, they're making sure that all of their firewalls are updated with the latest IPS signatures. They are following up on any false positives that occur. They're following up on false negatives that sometimes occur with some of these. They're finding new viruses coming in and submitting them to the antivirus company so that a new signature can be created. That entire process requires zero knowledge of assembly language. That entire process requires zero knowledge of programming. It is a completely different side of the house than somebody who's actually building the antivirus signatures, someone who's trying to create new ways to stop viruses from coming into the network. Those types of jobs are at the antivirus companies, the large cybersecurity companies that are building these signatures. They're the ones you're sending that executable to, saying, hey, I think this is a virus. It was not caught by my set of signatures. See what you can do with that. And you throw it over to them. At that point, that person who's very knowledgeable in programming, they understand assembly language. So already they have a set of skills that is very specific in the machine language of what the type of technologies we use today. They're taking that executable, they are disassembling it. They are looking at the process that virus takes to go through the CPU of your machine and back out again. That is a completely different set of skills and capabilities that is really outside the scope of IT. It is not something that the normal IT security person will do. Network administrators don't deal with that. Security teams don't deal with that. That is really a very specialized set of skills that is in demand. It is a set of skills that those large companies can use, but it's not something you'll commonly find at a large corporate environment. It's not something that is one of the more common security, and it's not something you see in IT security. It really has a separate place. It's a valuable place, but it is very separate, Darian.
Awesome. I also wanted to thank you for your availability and everything. I was able to pass my test last month.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. And what's the next step for you?
Right now I'm enrolling into the military. I plan on getting my CIS next. Should be pretty.
Well, they're going to like that you have
laid out.
There's a lot of folks getting into military service. They send me the messages when they're getting into their training. They have to go through and take these certification exams. So you're already a little ahead of the game there. They're going to love you.
Awesome.
I appreciate the call, Darian, and best of luck.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
That's awesome. It's a way to take the skills that you have now and immediately put them to use. And you're going to see a lot of great stuff in the military. It's almost like working for the ultimate of internet service providers. Is there anything more chaotic or important than being able to protect those networks? Pretty crazy. Let's go back to the phones to 518. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Are you there, caller? Caller. Are you on mute? Check. Oh, there you are. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, I'm calling from British Columbia, Canada.
Fantastic. BC. What question you have?
Sort of a long question, so I'll just get it out
as
soon as possible here. I bought a study guide from one author, and I bought a practice question guide from another author. And the exam objectives don't align as far as the chapter quizzes go. So in the study guide, the topics that are covered in each chapter are the quizzes at the end have just those questions, whereas the practice question guide has each chapter as exam objectives. So I was wondering how you would approach doing the questions in the practice question guide and correlating with that with the study guide that I have. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
It does. It's a thing that when I'm putting together my courses, it's something I'm constantly having to struggle with. Because if you go through the CompTIA exam objectives, not just for Security Plus, but you go for the exam objectives of Network Plus, of the 2 A+ exams, or any other certification exam anywhere from Microsoft, from Cisco, from VMware, from Palo Alto Networks, it doesn't matter who it is, they have to make a list of the exam objectives. But if you're going to teach these topics to someone, there's almost no set of exam objectives. There is no set of exam objectives that I've ever seen that are already in the order of how I would want to teach it. So this is sort of the problem that every author has to deal with. They now need to write a book on how to get somebody ready for the certification, but the exam objectives are structured in a way that would completely confuse somebody sitting down for the very first time trying to learn this content. So they jumble it up. They mix it around into the order that makes sense for them to be able to teach it, which is completely subjective, which means that one author's book is going to be in a completely different order than another author's book, which will be in a different order of somebody else's book. They're all in different order. And what you'll find in many of those books is the author at least is nice enough at the beginning of the chapter to say, in this chapter, we go through topics from section 5.3, section 2.2, and section 4.7. So they're all over the place in each one of these chapters. It makes it quite difficult. My problem with my videos is the very first set of training videos I did now over 10 years ago, I did exactly what the authors did. I put it in the same format, the same structures I thought would be good to teach and learn from. The problem is on the internet, people are kind of swooping in and getting a video that's in the middle. They're going after a topic that they're really looking for on the end. The exact structure of my videos is not as important as something in a book, and that's why all of my videos now are in the same order and are numbered identical to the CompTIA exam objectives, so that if you're looking at anybody else's book and they cross-reference where those topics come from, you could relatively easy find those topics in the videos that I have listed out on my website and in the video indexes. There's no good answer to this because it is so jumbled up. And if you try to learn by section of the exam, you'll be somewhat frustrated going from book to book because they will be in different places. And of course, if somebody's going by the list of the exam objectives, it may not be in a logical set of steps. So what you're seeing is kind of a natural thing in the industry. It's not something that is new. It's something that has been around forever. And it's just something you kind of have to cross-reference against and become accustomed to flipping back and forth and using a lot of yellow sticky notes. And that's kind of how I do it when I look at my books and have to go through it whenever I'm doing a certification. Ultimately, you can cross-reference and look at mine as a list of the exam objectives. And I think that's one of the reasons when I created my latest practice exam book, I used to do practice exams by section. But most people found the same problem you were having, is that what I'm reading is not teaching me by the section of the exam objectives. And that's why I just decided to do, what if I just gave you a sample exam, like a real exam, and you went about it that way? There's value on both sides. Unfortunately, there's just no good way to create one single format that works for everybody. And we sort of have to walk through it and deal with it and cross-reference and yellow sticky it and just become accustomed to it, unfortunately.
Okay. Sounds good. I appreciate all your content, and thanks for the answer.
I appreciate your call. Thanks so much. I don't know that it's a great answer. It is the answer of if you had to use that is what it is term, that's kind of the situation we're in. I can't see a good resolution. I don't know of a good way to do it other than what I am doing. I thought at one point I could take every book and then create a different video index for every book. Except what I found is that the authors would take topics that are in one video, part of one video, and topics that are in part of another video, and they put them in one chapter. Well, that doesn't work either. So that's one of those situations where there's just no good answer to be able to work through those. Hopefully that can give you at least a little bit of help and insight. Let's go to 784. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Professor Massa.
Howdy. What can we do for you?
Yeah, this is Matt. I'm calling from St. Vincent.
Thank you for calling.
And I just want to thank you for all these really great videos that you put out there. I did my A+, I passed. I did my Net+, and I passed. But I did my Security Plus twice, and I didn't pass. But now I just bought your Q&A, and I bought the course notes this week and downloaded them. And I went back and looked at these study groups from January 2019 to December 2019.
Great.
So I'm on my way. Yeah, but I have a couple questions, not too long.
Sure.
Is there like the multi-factor authentication, somewhere you are, something you know, and stuff like that? Are they like type 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, or can they come in any order? For people listening in, the multi-factor authentication and the different types, we don't usually do all of them at one time when somebody is authenticating, although I guess we could have somebody and check and see if they are somewhere someone is, something someone is, something someone has. We could go through each one of those. They don't necessarily have to be in any particular order because they have to pass each one of them. Most of the time, we're starting with the easy ones first. If you go to a website, one of the first things they ask of you is username and password. Well, if you don't know the username and password, which is really kind of an easy one to start with, something you know, there's no reason to continue on with something you have. Starting with something you have doesn't really make a lot of sense. Why would you go through that process if you don't even know the username and password? So there is, I guess there's some logic to putting those things together. But in most cases, it's a situation where as long as you get all of them that you want to ask in the single stream of authentication and they pass through each one of them, then you're in pretty good shape. Another example of putting things in a particular order is if you're going into a data center and they have a biometric, they're usually doing a biometric and then a personal identification number. And most of the time, the way this works is they're putting in the biometric. It's looking up who you are based on the fingerprint or the handprint that you're using. And then it when it pops up the list of the PIN numbers, it knows what PIN number it should be expecting at that point. So that's another good example of maybe there's a logical path you can take. But the reality is, it doesn't matter which order you do it in, you still have to get through each one of those factors to be able to authenticate ultimately.
All right, thank you. And my next question is, with your Q&A that I bought, right, is there a way that I can do them on your website, like log into my account there and click and do the Q&A on your website itself, or do I really always have to just use the PDF? Because it's kind of just to go from page to page in the PDF, as opposed to if they're online, I could just click and get the answer and the explanation right on your website itself.
This is one of those situations where it's where I had to make a decision on how do I get the questions to as many people as possible and still be able to make it something that people would be able to use. And the ultimate, what I came up with was a book format. And the PDF that's included with this is just a base PDF. It's not an interactive PDF, as you've probably seen, because not everybody on their mobile devices and other devices can use an interactive PDF. And I want people to be able to go through every question that's in this book. So it is really more of a printed book format. Although, as I mentioned in the instructions, I have links inside of this that allow you to click back and forth between the question and the answer. And then, of course, your browser has a hotkey that allows you to jump back to where you were. So at least there's a way that if you wanted to go back and forth, you could do that relatively easily with the functions that are built into your existing browser. There have been a lot of people asking, though, about having this in more of an engine that you could ask the questions and get them all in there. And we've been looking into that. We have a testing engine on our site. It's not one that doesn't record your answers. It doesn't store them for later. But there is some flexibility to that. It's not in a format that I'm completely comfortable with yet. Whenever I give you something, I want it to be very good. I want it to be the best you can find. And the engine that I have, at least currently, is not there. And I've been talking to other people that have engines, and we've been going back and forth. So I'm still interested in doing something like that. It's just not something that is immediately available. But I will put you on the list of people that want to have that online form so that it can be at least something they can electronically step through, have the answers right there and available, have the results calculated, be able to track it over time, and then maybe even have it in the same kind of format as an actual exam.
Yeah, great. Because I went on your website last night and I was doing some of these same the security pop quizzes, and I came up with figuring that out. There was a question there that spoke about ELA4. Could you give me a bit more insight on that, please? Because I got that one wrong. I'm not sure what it is. I didn't see it in the course notes or anything. Could you give me some more information on ELA4?
Yeah, the evaluation assurance level. This is really a federal government, for the most part of common criteria. And it's a way to have a device, a workstation, an operating system set up so that it had a particular level of security and you could validate it as having that level of security. There are different EAL levels. I think it's 7 levels of EAL. There are different requirements at each level, getting progressively more secure. As far as your Security Plus is concerned, you don't have to know the intricacies of the levels. You don't have to know what the differences are between those levels. But it's important if you're working with the U.S. federal government, you may be in a room and they're going to tell you all the machines in this facility need to be at EAL level 4, just so you're aware of that. There are other places outside of the federal government that also might use similar types of EAL structures in their environment, but most of the time you're seeing that with federal government.
All right, thanks a lot. So I'd just like to thank you for all those great videos and keep up the good work that you're doing. And I plan to take my exam next week, so wish me all the best. You take care now.
Absolutely. Thank you for calling, and I do wish you the best. I think you're going to do fine. You've got all the right study materials in place and doing the things I think you need to do. Good job. There is... when you get into those very intricate parts of the exam, you may run across things like EAL and some of the more federal government specific pieces. And that's because this is a big certification for the U.S. federal government, specifically Department of Defense. It's a minimum requirement to be able to get a job in IT. So if you are in that D.C., Virginia, Maryland area, there's a lot of people getting their Security Plus there because it's sort of the entry-level cert you need. They're skipping over A+. They're skipping over Network Plus. They're going straight to Security Plus because of that. And who can blame them? Let's go to 803. Hello, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hi, Professor Messer. This is JD from South Carolina. How are you?
Hey, JD. Thanks for calling.
Thank you so much. First, real quick, I just need to thank you because, in a large part, because of everything that you do, my son not only passed his Security Plus in 11th grade, but aced his AP in computer science and has a full ride to, unfortunately, Alabama computer science program. And I'm an Auburn grad, so you can see how we're a house divided now. However,
I do. Yes.
Go ahead.
I understand completely.
So,
yeah. Living in the southeast United States, I feel you. Okay.
So you said something that was intriguing. Your background being in business management, and my background for 20 years is also business management. With kind of like the MBA route, and thanks to an inspiration I've got from my son, realizing where I really enjoy, which is in the IT side, I've gone back to school to get some of that knowledge.
Nice.
Basically. What I'm finding is that as much as I can relate to people and I can and share with them how a lot of what I've done in business and the roles I even had in business correlate, it still seems to be like a hard nut to crack in terms of getting out there and getting meeting with people and getting interviews and stuff like that. I'm trying to figure out the best approach to do it. I have about a year left before I say, in a sense, graduate. And so now I'm working on some certifications like the Security Plus. But I'm wondering if you had just some ideas or some, hey, here's the best way to go about this, to go out there and fight your way in there.
There's a couple of ways, a couple of things I can think of when you're getting into, and this is sort of a common problem when people are moving from one type of industry into IT, because I get to talk to people that they're nurses, they're truck drivers, they're managers, and they want to move into IT, and they're making that move, but it's a different environment to be in. One of the first things I tell people is, well, you already have a base knowledge in some type of vertical, whether that's transportation or medical or whatever it happens to be. There are plenty of technology companies in that vertical as well. So there may be a sweet spot that appeals to those types of companies that may require that you travel. It may require you move. There may be stipulations to that, but there's some value associated with it. The other thing I tell people is you already know people in the industry. You probably have an IT department you work with. Hopefully you've been nice to those folks and you buy them cookies and pizza, and those are good people
Always.
to know. So you want to ask them. In the IT industry is just like any other industry. It's a small world. You know the people in town, in your city that work in your particular areas. You've created connections with them. You've met people over the years. They're part of your LinkedIn. You know where they are now. It's the same thing in IT. So when people, I would travel all over the Southeast U.S. as a systems engineer. And so I would talk to 3 or 4 companies a day in face-to-face, and I'd learn about places that had open positions, places where people were moving from company to company, places that are good to work, places that may not be so good to work. I have an interesting insight because I get to visit them. Those are interesting people to talk to. Talk to the systems engineers in your area. And one good place to meet these systems engineers is at their user group meetings. I mentioned this earlier, going to a Microsoft user group meeting, a Cisco user group meeting, a Palo Alto Networks user group meeting, and meeting those people, not only who are going to the meeting, but the people who are giving the meeting, and ask them, what do you see? What is your opinion? where's the best place to go for somebody doing something like this? There's certain jobs in our industry that are very good for people that are interested in not talking to anyone, and they can sit in the cube, work with 3 or 4 people, manage whatever it is they're trying to manage. There's another set of jobs for people that are like me, just like to talk. Let me tell you about this. Let's plug some technology in. Let's see what this does. Let's play around with this firewall, blah, blah, blah. That was a job for me. So, and not everybody I met or knew, I would tell them, oh, yeah, I get on a plane. I travel everywhere. I meet new people. We bring in evaluation equipment. I plug into these networks. We look at all the cool data. And they say, oh, I would never want to do something like that. Which is great because I did. So there's a place for everybody. It's not all the same job. It's not all the same. People don't all want the same things. People not always in a position to do always the same thing. But you will find the path that kind of fits for you once you get into it. Just take advantage of some of the relationships you've already built. Build some new ones, and you'll find the ways in. You may even find that you know more people than you thought you knew over on the IT side once you start looking into it.
No, I appreciate that. Actually, the way I coach my son, I said, listen, we're nerds with people skills. Let's use it. So
that's a good point.
And and all my children are just like me, which is wonderful. And the stakes are high. So I want to go make this work so I don't spend the next 25 years doing something that, I'm not passionate about. So listen, I appreciate everything. Thank you so much for the advice. I actually did put down the user group information on my notes when you were speaking. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks, JD. Roll Tide.
Bye-bye.
There he goes. Snuck it in there. One of the things that I think is important too, for those of you that are moving from one side to the other, you're going from one type of role and you wanting to get into IT, there's probably going to be a little bit of a dip in getting in the door, the little dip in currency and in salary in getting in the door. And I tell people all the time, and in fact, I saw someone mentioning this, gosh, my first job is going to have to be a help desk position. They were very angry that your first help desk position is such a common first step in the industry. Well, first off, help desks are different in many different places. So a lot of times you think of help desk, you always think of that person who's got the helmet on with the microphone and they're talking on the phone and they're constantly at a desk and they're taking call after call after call and they're evaluated on how many people they're talking. But not all help desks are the same way. I worked at a corporate help desk where I showed up in a suit and tie every day. I sat at a nice cube. I had a bunch of hardware in front of me. It was a normal phone. I didn't even have the headset. Normal phone. Oh, you need help? Oh, let me help you out. And then I walk over to where the person was, go up the other floor, see what they were doing, help them out on their computer directly. So it's not always the same. Secondly, you learn a lot. The problem is you kind of get that first dip down. If you're moving from one type of role to another, there could be a decrease in your salary. But I'm here to tell you, and please take this into account, there may be a difference in salary, but the ability for upward motion, the upward mobility in IT is probably more remarkable than any other vertical I've ever seen. If I could think of another type of job where you could move up faster, I don't think I can name one. IT not only allows you to move up fast and earn more money, it also doesn't really have a limit. There is no top level in IT because ultimately you can keep moving up and moving up and moving up. When my last job working for someone else was working at the Next Gen Firewall company where I was a systems engineer, not a manager of systems engineers, and we were making well into 6 figures at that point. It was a nice job to hang out in, and you were paid very, very well. And there was still upward mobility there. There were still places to go within all of that. So what I guess what I'm saying is that if you're moving into IT and you know you're going to take this hit financially, yes, you will probably have to start a little lower, but you can move up very quickly. Just apply yourself, learn the technology, spend the time getting into it, immerse yourself, work with the other people, learn from them. Everybody else who's there knows a lot. So sponge off of their knowledge, work with them on the weekends on their big projects, talk to the network people, talk to the database people, talk to the server administrators, find out what they're doing, find out the technologies they're working with, look over their shoulder, ask them if you could shadow them for a few things. The more you learn about all of those, the more opportunities are going to open up for you. And that means the higher your salary is going to go. So if I had to really recommend something along those lines, and by the way, I'm neither Auburn or Alabama. I'm a Florida State University graduate, so that was really just me being an Ojan provocateur. So sorry. Let's go to 614. Hello, caller. Which name are you calling from? Caller. Are you there? 614. Hello.
Hi. I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, this is Corey. I'm calling from Columbus, Ohio.
Fantastic. What can we do for you?
I just want to say thank you for your courses. First of all, you were really helpful. You've helped a whole lot. You helped me pass my Security Plus at one attempt.
Nice.
And, right now, I'm a cybersecurity engineer for, my dream job right now. And I've actually asked a lot of people to, introduce them to your course, and they're giving positive feedbacks as well. And so right now, I just want to ask a question. So I just remembered, saw your video right now. I just remembered I'm going to be this is the second year where I need to renew my certification. So how does that process work again?
Well, that is a mini and mired question to ask about certification renewal. So let's talk specifically about CompTIA certification renewal, because that's the one that most everybody watching is interested in. And there's not just one way to do it. There are multiple possible ways that you could renew your certification. Let me search real quick, because I've done a video that I have to hunt now on YouTube while I am talking and typing at the same time. In this video, if I turn this down a bit so nobody's worrying about this piece, you have to watch the ad coming through. This is a video that I've titled, and it's somewhat accurate, How to Renew Your A+ Network Plus or Security Plus in Just a Few Hours. So there's a video I created about renewing. Now, this does talk about a very specific type of renewal that is the CompTIA CertMaster CE, which if you took your 501 exam 3 years ago, does not apply to you. You would have to have taken the 401 for that specific type of renewal to apply to you. But I do go through all of the other ways to renew your certification in this video, because I think it's useful that you know how to go through all of this. So there's a few ways to do it. One of the ways, I talked about this earlier, is through collecting CEUs, continuing education units. That is one where you collect a certain number depending on what certification you have. You turn those into CompTIA, and then you now have renewed your certification. You have to do different kinds of things, though. You can't just watch all of my videos to be able to earn that. You have to go through the process of going to training classes, going to industry events, writing some things on the internet. So there's different categories and different numbers of hours of CEUs you can accumulate for the different categories. You'll have to check the CompTIA website, and then you pay $150. You turn in your CEUs, and you're renewed for 3 years. That's kind of the legacy way to do that. And for Security Plus, I think it's 50 CEUs to renew, if I'm thinking right off the top of my head. So it's quite a bit to be able to do that. Another thing people will do is they'll take a higher level CompTIA certification. So I've got a list of those. For example, with security, if you take the CISA Plus, the Pen Test Plus, or the CASP, you will earn that higher level cert that automatically renews the previous lower level cert, such as Security Plus. But obviously, that's not a simple thing. I could easily say, well, you just pass your CASP. That's all you do. You just pass the CISA. But there's obviously a lot of time it takes to be able to do something like that. So that's not a gimme. You still have to spend a lot of time studying. If you, anytime in the last 3 years, took a third-party certification, you took a Cisco certification, a McAfee certification, a Microsoft certification, those certifications might also count for CEUs. So you may be able to get a huge chunk of them out of the way, and that might be the way that you renew your certification. That's another option for doing this. And the last one, and this really isn't a renewal as much as it is just doing it, is you just take the exam again. So if you took the 401, you take the 501 now. If you pass the 501, you wait till the 601 comes out, you take that one. Well, which one did you take, the 401 or the 501?
I took the 401.
Okay, so
a few weeks to the hand.
If I were you and I had taken the 401, I would do it the way that most people are doing it these days, which is take the CertMaster CE. It's an e-learning course. You take it on your computer, your mobile device. It gives you some content, kind of the new content with 501. It gives you a test you have to take online. You have to answer each question right. I think that's the way it works. If you don't answer them right, you just do it again until you answer them right. CompTIA says that you can renew all you need to renew in 4 to 6 hours, and you're done. I've had people tell me I finished it in 2. So that's not a bad investment. It's a little bit more expensive than doing it through CEUs. For instance, for Security Plus, it's $199 US to do that. But if you're down to the wire or you're just not interested in collecting CEUs, you don't want to take another exam, this is a great way to do it. You're not spending much more than you had spent if you were just going to turn in your CEUs. That's the one I would recommend for anybody who's taken the 401 if they were really interested in renewing their Security Plus.
Okay, that was very helpful. Thank you so much.
There's about 1 million options on the CompTIA website. It takes a while to kind of sift through everything. So maybe that has streamlined some things for you. You can head straight to the CertMaster CE, continuing education. There's a lot of CertMaster programs, CertMaster Learning, CertMaster Labs. This is CertMaster CE is the one you're looking for.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Congratulations on your certifications and that job. It sounds fabulous, and best of luck with that renewal.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate absolutely. I appreciate the call. One of those things that you run into all the time is this constant process of renewal. It's not just a CompTIA thing, by the way. If you have a Cisco certification, there's a renewal process. If you have, not Microsoft certifications tend to take care of themselves because you're getting a certification on a technology. So if you have Windows 7 certification, well, Windows 7 is now end of life. That certification is kind of taking care of itself. You're kind of renewing by taking the newer versions of their certification exams. So that's one you would run into like that. But it's something the industry does to keep you up to date with the latest technologies. That's what the reason for these things are. Because the operating systems we used 5 years ago, the security technologies we used 5 years ago have already changed. So you always have to stay up to date with all of those. It's not, I know we look at it and think it's just they're just trying to get more money out of us. And I guess there's some reality to some of that, I guess. But you do have to stay up to date with the latest, and it is kind of nice to keep these certifications in place too. So probably a win-win on both sides, I would think. To the 803 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, my name is Quentin Curry, and I'm calling from Charleston, South Carolina. How you doing today?
Hey, thanks for calling, Quentin. What can we do for you?
So I have a quick question, or a slight dilemma. I was offered a contingent job for the DoD position as cyber security automation engineer in Alabama.
Nice.
But the job the reason why the offer is contingent is because they want me to have this Security Plus certification.
Yep.
So I took it twice, and I didn't pass. The next step is, should I just continue to study or try to enroll into a boot camp to pass the test?
The idea of a boot camp with me is not one that is very palatable. I've mentioned this in other study groups, is that I don't get the point of a boot camp. And I mentioned there's different kinds of boot camps, so maybe we should rewind there. The way you would see these in the industry often advertised is as learn everything you need to know to pass your Security Plus exam in a week. Sometimes with Security Plus, they go in 2 weeks. The reality is there is no human possible physical way to teach you everything you would need to know to pass the exam in 2 weeks. You can't do it. Laws of physics would have to be violated for you to be able to do that. It doesn't work. So boot camps aren't going to teach you everything you need to know in 2 weeks. Now, other people will say, but wait, what if you already studied up? What if you're familiar with the topics already, and this was really just a kind of a 2-week summary to be able to get you to where you needed to go? Well, if you already knew everything, why do you need to go to a 2-week summary to tell you the things that you already know? Most of your boot camp is going to spend teaching you things that you already knew, and maybe 25% of the boot camp, 20%, 15% gives you the last little thing you needed before you walked in. The problem is that you've now spent a lot of money on these boot camps. These boot camps are not priced the same way that normal corporate training is priced. And by the way, normal corporate training for a 1-week class is usually around $2,500 to $3,500 or more dollars, depending on the topic. The boot camps are sometimes twice that amount to be able to go to it because they promote it as cramming it all into your brain in a very short period of time. And we guarantee you're going to pass or your money back, which is sometimes a little bit too much to ask. That is why I usually will say boot camps is not the way to go. You want to go to something that is a much longer process. One of the things I've seen, and the reason I mention this is 1 or 2 weeks, is I have seen some community colleges and training facilities offer Security Plus boot camps, but it's over a 12-week or a 15-week period. Well, that's not really boot camp. That's really a training course for Security Plus, and that's perfectly reasonable. I think they really call it a boot camp just for marketing reasons. It gets people excited. It gets people wanting to learn these things. And I guess in the big scheme of things, it's shorter to do that than to go through a year's worth of training that might be somewhere else. So I don't generally recommend boot camps. There are places where boot camps, I guess I could recommend if somebody else is paying for it. Maybe. I think it's still a waste of your time. I think it still doesn't do what it needs to do to get you to pass. But the only thing you're out is your time, I guess. And maybe some of the content will get you started if you were in that situation. I still don't think it's a very effective use of your time. The other thing I really recommend people do is use those 4 things I mentioned before. Get a good book, get the good videos, get plenty of hands-on, and get as much Q&A as possible. Those are your 4 things. If you had to, and I don't think this is really the best way to go about it, is going through these boot camps, but I think if you maybe got your hands on different study materials that focused on those 4 things, I think you'd be in better shape for this. I think that you'd be able to get through, maybe get a different book since you've already gone through this test a couple of times. Maybe a change of pace would be nice. Maybe different videos. If you're not watching mine, watch somebody else's as well. Hands-on is pretty important, and there are some labs and other things that you can look at to do hands-on. And also the last one is Q&A. And that's probably the hardest one to run into because not all sites with Q&A and not all books with Q&A are alike. Some are okay. Some are pretty good. Some are awful. And I know that because I went through and looked at other QA guides when I was creating my own. On my site, I have a page under the Security Plus training menu of Security Plus study resources. My videos are the ones I promote, but you use whatever videos work for you. People in the chat room have already said, well, what good books are good books? Well, Resource number 2, you need a good book. I list out the 4 that I hear about and have seen the most. But this is a place where you might want to go to Amazon, click that read inside, look inside link to look at the books that are there. Lots of Q&A. I really promote my practice exams because I know what's in the practice exams book. I know if they're good or not because I wrote them. So I know they're really good. There's other good Q&A. You might find other places as well. Your mileage may vary with that one. And lastly, plenty of hands-on. There are some labs available that you can get off of Amazon, and I list those hands-on labs, including the ones from CompTIA themselves, that you can get through Amazon right on my website. That's in the Security Plus pull-down menu at the very bottom are the Security Plus study resources. I think it's really fundamentals. It's blocking and tackling. It's spending the time to get each individual item on the exam objectives checked off. So go through and use those. That should be your guide all the way through. And if you can go through each bullet of the exam objectives and explain that bullet to someone else, then you can check that one off as something you would know. Just churn through them. It's going to take some time, but if you churn through all of them, I think you're going to be fine.
Definitely appreciate it.
Good luck, Quentin. You're gonna get through this. Now that you've already been through the exam, you kind of know how crazy it is. It's a little wordy. The questions are very specific. Now you can kind of get past that point and use the exam against it. You kind of use the strategies on the exam, use the flag button as much as you can, jump around to questions if you need to, skip over the performance-based questions at the beginning if you would like, finish the exam, then come back. Now you know you need to manage your time properly. Make sure you never leave a question blank. I think you'll do fine.
Right. And one last thing.
Sure.
After the Security Plus, and maybe I'm stepping ahead of myself. After the Security Plus, being that I'm moving into a cyber role, what other certification would help me along the way? Well,
not knowing what that is, because a cyber doesn't exist. There's no such thing as it, but we're calling it these days. Everybody's just going to call it cybersecurity, and I'm going to assume what they mean is IT security. So if that's the case, there will probably be a need for you to understand how to manage a firewall, how to manage the IPS part of that firewall. These days, the IPS is part of the firewall. How to manage and protect email systems and the spam that would come through those email systems. Ultimately, how to set up and run the VPN connections, which you will certainly have, encrypted tunnels between locations. What about multi-factor authentication? How is that handled in your environment? What system connects back to your Microsoft Active Directory database and is able to authenticate against that database? Those are things that you will be doing day to day, not to mentioning the SIM, the Security Information and Event Manager, that's pulling logs from all of your switches and routers, pulling them down, and you'll be creating reports and pulling information off of those. There is plenty to learn. My recommendation of those 7 things I just mentioned, pick one of them. Pick the one you're interested in, or you may be in a case where whoever you work with, they're going to tell you you're going to be responsible for this. My recommendation, learn as much as you can about that thing. If they put you on the SIM, learn everything there is to know about that SIM. If they put you on the firewall, learn everything there is to know about that firewall. Some of those will be firewall certifications from the firewall company. Some of those will just be you sitting down with the manual. Some of them will be YouTube videos that you're going to be watching. It will depend on the technology and what you'll be supporting. But my recommendation to anybody in that kind of role is to completely envelop yourself, soak up as much as you can. You should be a sponge in that technology and become an expert in it, because those skills will allow you then to take that and move elsewhere within the organization or into a different organization. That's where the value is. Having a very broad understanding across the board is only somewhat useful long-term in this industry. You need to become an expert in a particular niche, find the niche that works for you, and then become that expert, and you're going to do just fine in your career.
Man, Professor Mess, I definitely appreciate it.
Thanks for calling, Quentin. Best of luck.
Thank you.
That's a challenge, isn't it? I have failed my fair share of certification exams. There was one where it was similar to Quentin. I took 2 times and failed. I had to take that one 3 times to finally pass it. I want to say it was on cabling of all things. It was the CNX on cabling. The CNX isn't even a thing anymore. It's not a certification anymore. And I just could not get past it was very detailed on cabling. These were some of the hardest industry certification exams. There was one on Ethernet, on token ring, on FIDI, on cabling. I think there was an ATM one as well at the end there. Very, very detailed exams, very hard to pass. You had to know intricate knowledge of these different categories of cable and how they were used. And I just could not get through it. I was not a physical cabling guy. And so I had to kind of learn from the ground up and learn by having it completely crush me twice before finally passing it. So there's always a way. Once you pass it, how hard? Then it's clear sky. Like, wow, that wasn't so hard. It only took 3 times for me to get through it and pass through those and make it happen. For the chat room, why don't I offer super chat? Well, I don't want to. There's a whole philosophy I have in not looking or asking for or accepting donations. I just don't do it that way. I don't want you to want to be able to do it that way. I don't want me to have to do that either. So my goal is to offer you product that you can get something from in exchange for your investment. And if you're someone who just wants to support what we're doing financially, hopefully you already use Amazon. You can go to professormesser.com/Amazon. I think that's a good trade-off, I think, and having all of those. Also, we'll go to the callers in just a moment. Also in the chat room, do I absolutely need the Network Plus before getting into the Security Plus? You do not. It helps. I mentioned earlier, I really haven't gone through this, but to be very good in IT security, you really do need to be an expert in networking. So much of what we do in IT security is just network with a layer of security put on top of it. I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about someone setting up a SIM. Well, to set up the SIM, you need to be able to pull the log files across the network. There's a whole set of protocols and processes for doing that. Setting up a VPN between 2 sites means that you're going to have to set up the IP routing that gets the data between those. Different VPNs do it different ways. Some are bridging, some are routing. If you're doing this through a firewall, the firewall may be doing its VPN forwarding based on a routing table. It may be doing it based on a type of application. It depends on the firewall and how it works. Firewalls themselves have to be implemented into the network. Usually they're put into a network that is redundant already with multiple routers and multiple switches, and you're probably implementing multiple firewalls either in an active-active configuration where both firewalls are active at the same time, or an active-passive where one firewall is active and if it goes away or fails, the other one starts picking up and becomes active. There's different ways to engineer those into the network depending on which you choose, and there's advantages and disadvantages of each. All of those decisions and things we just talked about are all network questions. None of that's a security question. It's all engineering and networking and IP and redundant protocols and integrating into existing networking products. So there's this level, not even a level, a very broad foundation, a very deep foundation of networking that's very, very useful. But ultimately, it is one that you will need finally when you get into a security role. As far as these certifications are concerned, there's not a ton of networking in Security Plus. There's a little bit, but not enough that you would need to do your Network Plus first before you take your Security Plus. As I mentioned, a lot of people start with Security Plus because, like our last caller with Quentin and others in DC and Maryland and Virginia, the government wants the Security Plus as a bare minimum. They don't care if you have an A+. They don't care if you have a Network Plus. They want to see the Security Plus. So many people who are taking the Security Plus, that is their first certification. And it takes a little bit longer to study when you get into port numbers and trying to figure out these networking terms. But it's not overwhelming, and it's things you would have learned anyway in Network Plus. It just takes a little more time, and now you have it as you're studying for the Security Plus. So that is the difference. Now, which one do you take? You take whichever one gets you to your final goal. So in the case of Quentin, in the case of people in D.C., or working for the federal government, their final goal is getting a job with those organizations. that means Security Plus is the right answer for them. But you may be working in a completely different place. You may be in Kansas. You may be in Missouri. You may be in Columbus, Ohio. You may be someone who is just trying to get a job in the local insurance company. Well, they need a networking person. Well, then Network Plus is probably the better choice. You pick the certification that is right for your goals and objectives. Those goals and objectives will change over time, but I know there's something you want to do next. Figure out what that next thing is and set all of the goals, including your certifications, to meet that next objective, and you'll do just fine. One of the things that I always tell people when they are studying for Security Plus or any certification, none of this is overwhelming ultimately, but it sure seems to be that way at the beginning. And I think it's more of a fear of the unknown. I have the same problem. When I'm thrown into a situation where I need to understand a particular technology, it scares everyone. It scares me certainly when I'm getting into this. I know nothing about this. I don't understand how this works. I don't see the connectivity of this. I don't know how all of this is integrating together. And then you finally get into it and you start breaking it into smaller pieces and you start learning the technology. You grab the manual, you look at Wikipedia, you look at some YouTube videos, you go through the book, you start learning this, and then you realize, well, that's all it is. That's it. That's not so bad. Okay, I got that part. Let's break off another little piece and go at it that way. And what ultimately you finish going through all of the pieces and you realize that was not as difficult as what I thought it was going to be. I had turned this into an enormous thing when in reality, it's all very straightforward. There were certainly things I needed to learn. There were certainly new technologies I needed to understand, but none of it ultimately is insurmountable. It is all relatively straightforward, but you do have to spend the time learning and breaking through all of the different pieces of that. So whenever I tell people it sure is nice to have some of these technologies under your belt, none of it comes easy, but it does eventually get there. So don't be overwhelmed at Security Plus. Don't be overwhelmed really at any technology. What you'll find is once you break it into smaller pieces and absorb all of those different pieces and learn some of the things you didn't know, it's never as bad as it looks like when you first started down that path. And it'll be the same for you as well. I am certain of that. Well, thank you for being here in that first hour. Thank you for your Q&A time and participating and answering the questions with me. That's always fun. And thank you for your calls and your messages in the chat room and the questions you have in the second hour. It's always nice to hear from folks as well who are working through their certifications, and hopefully there's something you were able to take away from that. We thank you for joining us this month. We've got another Security Plus study group coming up next month as well. You can always check the calendar for the next event and when it's going to be. You can find that event calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. Thank you for being here on the Security Plus study group. We will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.